3 minutes after 10. I genuinely don't know what's more comical. The people who brought you Brexit claiming that the opposition lack a plan, or the bloke who stood in the rain without an umbrella claiming that the other bloke is the one who hasn't got a plan. I mention that because the dust is settling now. Good morning. I hope you're well. And some of the stuff that hadn't quite crystallised yesterday, some of the thoughts that were still a bit embryonic, are now developing. The first is this. This isn't going to be my question, my starter at 10, although we may work towards it. I don't know what sort of mood are you in? I'm in the mood for 3 hours of just talking politics and seeing where it takes us. We won't be doing that for 6 weeks. I'm not even here next week. But I feel that it is pretty much the only conversation. So we'll definitely catch up at what's going on in the Post Office inquiry, more testimony from Paula Venables, and we will definitely be looking ahead to the International Court of Justice issuing a new ruling on Israel's conduct of its war in Gaza. But that isn't going to happen on my watch. I think that'll happen about an hour into Sheila's show. But apart from that, I think we'll just sort of dance around, will we, together? Waltz around the dance floor together, arm in arm, of British politics. Should we start with an Idiot's Corner? We'll start there. I don't know how the Idiot's Corner is going to play out in the 6-week interregnum, but Colin is in there first this morning. He goes, Keir Starmer stood in front of many local Medway Council Labour councillors, exactly the same as Rishi's parachuted audience. Thing is, Colin, you knew that they were Labour councillors that he was standing in front of. When he gave his speech in the warehouse yesterday, the workforce were wearing high-vis jackets, and so were two Conservative councillors. Why were the Conservative councillors wearing high-vis jackets, trying to blend in with the workforce at the warehouse where the event was being staged? So, again, fair play to you for tying yourself in knots already before I'd even started speaking this morning, and fair play to you for keeping the seats warm in Idiot's Corner today. But I looked at the settling dust yesterday, and two things firmed up for me. The first was, I think he hates his own party. I think Sunak hates his own party. And the second was, he really just doesn't want to be there anymore. If he wins, I think he'll look like Boris Johnson and Michael Gove did on the day after getting Brexit over the line. He's thinking, oh my days, I've got to do another 5 years, not just in this job, but in this country. I think at the moment it's highly unlikely that he wins, but you never say never in politics. The lead is not a million miles away that Labour have at the moment from what Theresa May had going into 2017, and we all know that nearly fell apart at the seams. But the two thoughts I've got, which really surprise me because they are quite counterintuitive. They fly in the face of all traditional politics, don't they? That the Prime Minister, the incumbent Prime Minister, doesn't want to win. He has had enough. And part of the reasoning behind calling the election is a deep disdain and disregard for his own MPs. Because I think wherever you turn this morning, the analysis is pretty consensus-based. That the people who are crossest about the campaign being called early are his own side. I mean, Starmer was talking about being up for it as long ago as January. He's been calling in the House of Commons for a general election. So I don't think he's wrong-footed them. I think he might have wrong-footed Farage a bit, which denies us the pleasure of seeing him fail to get into Parliament for the 8th time. But hey-ho, but Donald Trump's got boots that need licking. But he seems to have wrong-footed his own members more than anybody else. One of the most prosaic lines I've heard, I think it was from Lewis Goodall, who will be sitting in this chair next week, was that the dislike of Rishi Sunak or the unhappiness with Rishi Sunak would be quite prosaic. It will be these people knowing that they're going to be out of a job in July now who thought they were going to be out of a job in November. So they had August, September, October, November. Best part of 6 months to line up an escape route, to make some calls, to call in some favours, to set up an alternative employment, maybe get a couple of directorships, old boy. For the posh ones, goodness knows what people like Gullis and the rest of them are going to do. I can't imagine that he'd go back to teaching, however desperate the profession may be for new personnel, for more personnel. But they thought they had the best part of 6 months to prepare their passage out of Parliament, and Rishi Sunak has pulled the rug from under them and given them 6 weeks to sort it out. I suspect there'll be more announcements of people who won't be standing again. So those two thoughts I find really hard to get past. Number one, he doesn't want to win, Rishi Sunak. And number two, I think he's deliberately flicked the V's at his own party. I honestly think, I could be wrong about the second one, but I don't think I'm wrong about the first one. So what we're going to talk about today? Well, I would like to take you back to the time that Rishi Sunak stood behind a lectern outside Downing Street and didn't end up looking like a drowned rat. And I'd like to take you back to his accession to the highest office in the land, a position, of course, to which he has never been elected, either by the membership of the Conservative Party or the electorate of the United Kingdom. The only position to which he's ever been elected is the MP for Richmond, which I suspect he's probably hoping he'll lose that as well, although the statistics suggest that he won't. And partly because Liz Truss had been so catastrophically awful, and partly because I think that he had emerged from COVID with a fairly good reputation. For the record, and in his defence, I think one of the main reasons why Liz Truss beat him to the leadership of the party, as voted for exclusively by the Conservative Party membership, I think that had a lot to do with the colour of Rishi Sunak's skin. It's easy to say in hindsight because Liz Truss was, in retrospect, so obviously catastrophic, but most of us, I think, had a fairly clear idea of just how obviously catastrophic she would prove to be before she proved to be obviously catastrophic. So why would you favour her over the man that had brought you furlough and had apparently helped to steer or helped to keep Boris Johnson somewhere close to the straight and narrow of the of his premiership? So he was like seen as the safe pair of hands on Downing Street, while Boris Johnson next door was seen as the fumbling hands. So when he became Prime Minister, he stood in front of Downing Street with quite a lot on his side. He wasn't Boris Johnson and he wasn't Liz Truss. And that was enough, even for sort of sworn enemies of Brexit and the Conservative Party in its current iteration. That was enough to earn, at least briefly, the benefit of the doubt. I am tempted to ban the words Suella Braverman from answers to this question, just because I think it's too obvious. You know, you say, where did it all go wrong? I say, well, 2.5 hours after claiming that he was in favour of integrity, professionalism and accountability, he put the human embodiment of the polar opposite of all of those three things back in the Home Office. I don't know what the polar opposite of integrity, professionalism and accountability actually is in words, but I know what it looks like. It looks like Suella Braverman. And he put her straight back in the Home Office, at which point any claims to integrity, professionalism and accountability disappeared out the back door. So that's too easy. I want a slightly broader sweep of Sunakism, of Sunak's premiership. And the question I'm going to ask you is, where did it all go wrong? Or I love it when I like it's a great freedom I have here to finesse the question live on the radio. How did it all go so wrong for him? At this point, as I say, anything can happen in 6 weeks. But right now, his own party hate him. The country are laughing at him. His own advisors are arguing over whether or not he should have called the election in the first place. And he appears to wish that he was absolutely anywhere but wherever it is that he is today. The gaffes, that's terrible for a politician. That's like a lingering smell that you can't get rid of. That's like when someone sews prawns into your curtain rail when you're trying to sell your house and you don't know where the smell is coming. Once the aroma of gaff-prone politics takes hold of a politician, it's almost impossible to get rid of. Turning up in Wales to talk about the Euros without knowing that Wales, someone should have said that to him. You know, if you're going to do that thing, and I don't think Sunak pretends to be into football in order to posture. I think he is a genuine fan of Southampton Football Club. He's not anything like as sincere or authentic a football fan as Keir Starmer is, but I don't want to. There's going to be plenty of mockery of Rishi Sunak on this programme today and for the coming 6 weeks. So that's not an area where I'd mock him. So perfectly reasonable that someone who was at Southampton last week might mention the football when he's out meeting actual people. And we know from watching him for a couple of years that he's not actually very good at meeting real people. He always looks very odd. He always looks a little bit like a sort of character in a in a, is it simulacrum? Or he looks like a character in some sort of holodeck. Hello, normal people. It's like something out of Red Dwarf. He's like Chris Barry in Hey, Red, that's who it is. He's a bit like Rimmer in Red Dwarf. Hello, normal people. But he's actually, I'm just shake head, shake hands, roll sleeves. He doesn't seem very normal. He's quite robotic. But his aides should have known he's likely to bring up the football. So don't it'd be like John Cleese, wouldn't it, in Fawlty Towers? Don't mention the football because the Welsh aren't in it. First thing he did, sat down in a brewery, which you couldn't make up as well. Here is a man who doesn't have an umbrella in the rain and can't organise a knees up in a brewery. He turns up at a brewery in Wales, talks about the football, at which point someone has to say to him, "We're not in it, champ. We're not in it." So that's part of the problem for him, his personal inadequacies. But they weren't obvious when he was Chancellor, which means that this may be a chicken and egg case. Would the real Rishi Sunak please stand up? Please stand up. And he was always useless. He was always weird. He was always petulant. He was always gaffe prone. Or has something happened over the course of the last few months that has rendered him petulant, rendered him ridiculous, rendered him awful, rendered him gaffe prone? I don't know. So I'll ask you both questions. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me one or both of these things. Where did it all go wrong for Rishi Sunak? 0345 6060 973. And what was the other one? Is anyone paying attention to this guff? I'm not. Where did it all go wrong for Rishi Sunak? And why? Why did it go wrong for him? So what went wrong, as in the detail of it, and how could it have gone so wrong so fast, as in the overview, the analysis, the meta, the big picture? Imagine that you are a drone hovering above British politics. So we want the detail, the events, the facts of it going so wrong for Rishi Sunak. And then we want the why of it, almost like the ecosystem in which it could happen. The tides, the waves, the ebbs, the flows of politics upon which he has been so far dashed to pieces. And obviously, we have to caveat anything we talk about with whatever the polls say and however catastrophic the opening days of the campaign may have been and however ridiculous he looks. You can't take anything for granted. So where did it go so wrong? And why did it go so wrong for Rishi Sunak? It's 10:16. It is 18 minutes after 10, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, with you, of course, until 1 o'clock. Quite a lot to get through today, including, I can give you a quick heads up on one of the full disclosure interviews that I'm proudest of. One of the I can get a bit emotional even thinking about it. One of the best I've ever done in terms of how much I enjoyed it. No guarantee that you will, but it's a fairly reliable indicator. Before that, he lost to Liz Truss, of course. 49 days later, he became Prime Minister. And there was an air of competence and hope around him. So how did it all go so wrong so quickly for Rishi Sunak? David's in Northampton. David, what would you like to say?
Morning, James. Well, I think where it all went completely wrong is where he's banging on about Rwanda. It's just not going to work, and he knows it. And he's already made a mistake in his election speech where he said that if I win the election on the 5th of July, planes will be going to Rwanda. Well, they won't, because the election won't be decided by then, and therefore it's not going to work. So he knows that Keir Starmer's going to win.
It'll be decided by the morning of the 6th.
It will.
What?
Yeah, but he said flights will be going out on the 5th of July.
No, I don't think he did. But I mean regardless, I don't think they'll be going that week anyway. The thing about this, and I find this absolutely fascinating, because I'm obviously like you. I think it's a ludicrous proposal. And also, I don't know whether you agree with the second bit, I think it's morally disgusting, never mind legally fraught. And he thought that as well. So yeah. It was something Boris Johnson came up with just to distract attention away from presumably Partygate or one of the other scandals that he was caught up in. James cleverly described it in terms that I can't use on the radio. Rishi Sunak thought it was ridiculous and also, as Chancellor, far too expensive. And yet, as a millstone, he tied it round his own neck from the minute he got into Downing Street. Do you think he had to do that? Do you think that having Suella Braverman inside the tent.
Obviously, I think that.
Oh, the phone line's driving me nuts, David. No offence to you, mate, but I can't be doing with the clicks and the glitches. We may come back to you, we may not. Only time will tell. Mo's in Birmingham. Mo, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. How are you?
Very well, thank you, Mo. How polite of you to ask. What's on your mind?
That's all right. I'll answer both aspects of the questions that you put out. I think, for one thing, Rishi Sunak was a flawed PM because of his sheer lack of experience for the role. He's only been in Parliament for 6-7 years, I think.
Is it? Yeah.
And I don't think he has a grasp of the game. And I think having a grasp of the game...
Keir Starmer's not been in Parliament for very long, you know.
He's made his faux pas, and we'll see if potentially as PM he similarly has those flaws.
Right.
I think if you look at some of the PMs we've had, Theresa May, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, for example, these were seasoned politicians.
Yes.
And I think Rishi Sunak has failed to understand the game. And I think...
I don't know. Do you know? I don't know that I agree with you about that. I agree with you, obviously, that something's gone horribly wrong very quickly. But I don't know. I mean, what would have been different if he'd had more experience? What? I mean, because I'm thinking about the things that he's fallen over. Let's go with the first suggestion from the first caller, that he didn't get rid of the Rwanda millstone the minute he got into Downing Street, despite the fact that he's known to have thought it was a ridiculous and wrong-headed idea in the first place. Why would more experience have saved him from that, do you think?
I think more experience would have helped him handle, and I think this is what has ultimately hobbled him. He has failed to manage his defeat to Liz Truss in the Tory party leadership.
Okay.
You know, park the politics to one side here.
It's kind of hard to do when you're having a conversation about why the Prime Minister is so awful. But no, you're going in on personality, which is fine.
Yeah. Rishi Sunak is one of life's success stories. You know, second-generation immigrant, family have worked hard, built themselves up from, I'm not saying from nothing, but near enough to nothing.
Absolutely.
Went to a great school.
Yes.
Went to a great uni.
Yes.
Got himself a great career.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did very well on the back of that.
Certainly did.
Got himself become MP.
Yeah.
In no time,
married the daughter of one of the richest men on the planet.
Yes,
that's a win, isn't it? I'm sure it's a love match as well, but it's flipping out. What a bonus to fall in love with someone who's the daughter of the richest man in India.
It's a win.
Yeah.
Okay. Became Chancellor of the Exchequer. Who could say that they've become Chancellor of the Exchequer in no time?
Yeah.
Became that. One of the high offices of the country, and then PM.
Yeah.
Okay, later on. Through what he would regard as hard work and through the demonstration of that meritocracy that I'm assured he believes in.
Talent.
And losing to Liz Truss, by all accounts, and I think he is a spreadsheet person.
Yeah.
When all the formulas say that he should win, he is the best character. He is saying the right things. He's doing all the things, A, B, and C, and being unable to defeat her. I'm not slagging her off, but maybe I am actually.
You're welcome.
Apologies.
She's absolutely ridiculous.
But the fact that he lost to her, and I think he really fails to grasp that. And as a consequence,
this is absolutely fascinating. So this is full-on psychology. So even though 49 days later he could have done the biggest "I told you so" of all time, could have done a lap of honour flipping the V's at the Conservative Party membership that didn't, waving lettuces under the noses of anybody who didn't back him. You think that the first proper setback of his life, if you like, the first failure of his life, actually threw him off kilter so badly that even though 49 days later he got the big job, something inside him, part of his mechanism was broken or bent, corrupted.
I think so, and as a consequence, I think he's had to grasp for that reason why, and as a consequence, I think he's had to compromise on the things that he felt was the formula to success.
Which, for the first time in his life, he's put together the algorithm, and the result that's come out the end was not the one he was expecting, and therefore he's lost his faith in his ability to put together algorithms. Is that what you're saying? Did you come up with this morning, or when I asked the question, or has it been?
This has come up within the last 10-15 minutes.
You are winding me up, Mo. This is genius, man.
Partly from my own life experience, because as I said, there's a lot I can relate to him. I don't have the multi millionaire wife and whatever else and so on. But a lot of the life aspects beforehand, I could relate to. And
so
I remember when I had my first
You're feeding the formulas into the machine, you're feeding the formula into the machine, and it's never, ever let you down.
Yeah, exactly that. And I think, as a consequence, just to wrap up, the fact that he thinks he's done a good job since, and the polls have simply not moved, I think is an additional... the failure of the algorithm hasn't worked out. I think there is a frustration there.
This is genius. It's driving him mad. Hang on a minute. I've done this and I've done that, and then the polls are not followed. I like it a lot. I mean, it's utterly unprovable because it's all gone on under the bonnet, but it would prove, or rather it would explain why he appears to have lost faith in the job entirely, doesn't it? It would be like, I can't do this anymore. It's actually driving me mad. It's like he's like a Shakespearean hero being dashed together, being dashed upon the rocks of outrageous fortune, Mo. I like it.
Yeah, I think that's it then. Yeah.
Well, no, don't say it like that because, it's a phone-in show. I don't want to finish it yet. There's loads of other answers to the question of how's it gone. So, and that takes it right back to the minute he lost to Liz Truss. I wonder if we underestimate the psychological damage that would have done to him, which meant that when he came into Downing Street, he'd lost faith in his own judgment. He'd lost faith in his own algorithms. He'd lost faith in his own formula, his own spreadsheet. So he's like, I better do Rwanda, even though it's ridiculous, because, Liz Truss. He has spent, here it is, to continue the Shakespeare analogies, Liz Truss is banquo at Rishi Sunak's feast. Phil's in Cardiff. Phil, what would you like to say?
Morning, James.
Morning, Phil.
The two bits you were asking, I think the first part goes back to, I think your previous caller was talking about flawed judgment.
Yes.
And the idea that he could lead the Conservative Party and talk about integrity and visibility and...
it was integrity, professionalism and accountability, Phil.
Accountability,
Do you want to know how to remember that?
Tell me.
IPA.
Oh, very good.
It's my favourite point. So there it is. Integrity, professionalism. You'll never forget the order now, all the words, because every time you think of Rishi Sunak, you'll think of me, and then you'll think of an IPA, and then you'll say integrity, professionalism and accountability.
And then I'll want to drink one.
Yes. Yeah, I recommend the Sierra Nevada, actually, would probably be my favourite. Anyway, carry on, Phil.
Yeah. And of course, he could never corral his entire party, the 57 varieties of the Popular Front of whatever, to live up to that. And he was also battling history in terms of the eye of the population feeling disappointed with the Conservative Party in terms of their lack of moral compass.
I thought this worked in his favour. I honestly thought he had this golden opportunity to distance himself from what had gone before, and he fluffed it.
And you'd think so, and you can't blame the guy for saying it at the time.
No.
But in retrospect, he's hoisted his petard, as it were, and he can't live up to it, and he's not being helped by the people around him, some of whom he's trusted, which is the second part of what you were asking.
Yeah.
He's gone with the kind of Looney Tunes part of the party, and it's kind of.
I don't think he had much choice on that. Remember, he put Jeremy Hunt in number 11, and Jeremy Hunt has many flaws, but he's not perceived as part of the Looney Tunes, the sort of Andrea Jenkins.
But he did recruit. He did reappoint Braverman 6 days after sacking her. For a sackable offence.
Well, he didn't sack her, Truss sacked her, but your point stands. He brought her back, and that speaks to being handcuffing himself to the Looney Tunes wing of the party.
I think you've said it before. The last proper person in that party to fall on their sword honourably was Amber Rudd.
Twice.
And that's going back how long now?
Only 5 years. Only 5 years. Because people often ask me, I sound like No, I know, it feels like 100 years ago. It feels like 100 years ago, but it was in 2019 twice. So I get asked this a lot, Phil, about when I do my book events about how hard will it be to get back to normality, to unbreak Britain, if you like, or to fix Britain. And part of the answer to that is Amber Rudd, actually, because it's not that long ago that both individual ministerial responsibility and a resignation from office under Boris Johnson, entirely on principle, in objection to what Boris Johnson was doing. It was only 5 years ago, which I find quite encouraging. Great analysis. Well, a couple of crackers to open up the morning. 10:31 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines. It is 10:34. Okay, it's just a slight rejig here, because I would like to talk to you if you had the gloss knocked off. Do you see what I mean? I mean, my own experience of gloss was vanishingly short. As I mentioned earlier, I wanted not to ban Suella Braverman from this bit of the programme, but to recognise that that's a very obvious and easy answer to the question, where did it all go wrong for Rishi Sunak? So I'd like to broaden the parameters of inquiry now to really include people for whom the gloss stayed on for a while. So when was the gloss applied to Rishi Sunak? The gloss was probably applied to Rishi Sunak when Eat Out to Help Out was greeted as a great success. In retrospect, it was an absolute catastrophe, of course, and he was told so at the time. But by the time he was picking up the mess that Liz Truss had left behind, including, of course, Jeremy Hunt as Chancellor, he inherited that situation from Liz Truss after she had to get rid of Kwasi Kwarteng. He didn't put him there, as I said a moment ago. Thanks for the corrections. All of them. The gloss was still there because of furlough, perhaps. I know that 3 million people were cruelly excluded from that process, from that scheme, and for them the bitterness runs deep and strong, quite rightly. But for people who were benefited, for businesses that were saved, for jobs that were protected by furlough, albeit it involved a redistribution of our own money, it was still politics. It was socialism, actually, in many ways, but it was still politics that reached parts other politics does not reach. So the gloss is on him. And then, of course, there is the added layer of gloss applied simply because he is not Boris Johnson, whose corruption by the end was complete, and he is not Liz Truss, whose incompetence by the end was spectacular. So there's several layers of gloss. You might have furlough, you might have Eat Out to Help Out. You might have, and I suffer from this a bit because it's not a strong point of mine, but you might also think that if someone can make a ton of money in the city, then they're probably going to be really good as Chancellor of the Exchequer. It's not true, of course. The skills you need to make a personal fortune in the city are not the skills you need to run an economy. Probably best illustrated by the fact that as Prime Minister he chose to completely ignore the analysis from his own employer about the biggest damage that's been done to our economy in the last few years, which was, of course, the Brexit that he voted for and supported. But the layers of gloss are many. You've got the furlough gloss, you've got the Eat Out to Help Out gloss, you've got the personal wealth gloss, which I do think prompts many people to believe, oh, if he can do that, I bet he can do this. You've got the he's not Boris Johnson gloss. You've got the he's not Liz Truss gloss. There's several layers of gloss that Rishi Sunak arrived in Downing Street with on. And then you've got the layers of gloss we've discussed, the IPA gloss, the integrity, professionalism and accountability gloss. So there's several layers of gloss. I'd forgotten actually how many layers of gloss there were. And I'd like you to tell me if you saw those layers of gloss, what knocked them off. I don't want the conversation to be a kind of retrospective celebration by people who never really liked him or who gave up their brief glimpse of hope and optimism the minute he put Suella Braverman back in the Home Office. You had hopes, you had high hopes or high-ish hopes for Rishi Sunak beyond the first day in office. What knocked the gloss off Rishi Sunak for you? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I mean, obviously, I could add here as a Conservative supporter, but you don't have to be a Conservative supporter. You could have just reached the end of your tether with Johnson and Truss. So you had high hopes for Rishi Sunak. What happened to them? Okay? And if you hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. What was it? What knocked the gloss off for you? Get in quick, because after the next junction, I want to talk to Helen Hodinott about Paula Vennell's latest day of giving evidence at the Post Office inquiry. And I suppose we should have some sort of Kleenex watch in place, shouldn't we, to keep track of just how many tears are shed. And the question of how many of them are crocodile tears is one that I know a lot of people there are happy to answer. John's in Muswell Hill to steer us back towards Rishi Sunak. John, what do you think knocked the gloss off?
The thing is, I'm not a Tory, never have been, but a lot of things he did right. And it was the history of the party. It wasn't really the gloss off of him. It was, the shit that was, the damage done to the party that stuck to him. But coming back to what you said at the beginning...
hang on a minute. We can come back to that in a second. What do you think he did well then?
Well, obviously the job support scheme.
Oh, you mean the stuff I've just mentioned as Chancellor, not as Prime Minister? Yeah,
that's right. I mean, so he had a good history there, and I think a lot of voters don't really care that much about the Rwanda scheme.
I think this is the fascinating. If I had a kind of magic machine that could read the minds of the population, that's the question I'd be asking. Because if you get polled and you get asked about it, you might say that you care. Do you see what I mean? It's why polls are
correctness.
Precisely, or the opposite. You might think, that's right, those bloody small boats. But when you go home, that's not what you're talking about or worrying about. You're worrying about your energy bills or your GP appointment or putting food on the table.
Yeah, but do you know what, James? In the end, I think it comes back to what you said at the beginning.
Go on.
He's tried to sort of appease the Tory right, and they don't like him because of the colour of his skin. He would never be able to do the right thing for them. They would never back him. I think that's dawned on him. I mean, he has to find a way out of this. And the only way he can really get out credibly is to fight this to the best of his ability and then step aside because, I presume he's already done his 3 years to get his Prime Minister's pension and all that. But
he doesn't really need that, does he? Well, we can agree on one thing. It's that the Prime Ministerial pension isn't going to touch the sides of the Sunak's personal finances.
No.
But no, you can. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that the parliamentary party is the same as the broader membership. I don't think that the racism in the parliamentary party would be as acute as it would be in the shires in the membership. Otherwise, you'd need to explain to me how anyone could have arrived at the conclusion Liz Truss was a safer pair of hands and a more competent politician than Rishi Sunak. If you can't do that, you are left with the race question, and that appeasing the far right of his own party, inside and outside Parliament, possibly being the thing he could never get past. He couldn't have power without them because they were still so high on their own supply after Brexit and Boris Johnson. People like Suella Braverman being taken seriously by the British media, a frankly extraordinary episode in our island history. And he had to keep them sweet because, they were setting up television stations at the time, of course, to promote the bile that she lives on, and a Tory PM who was jettisoning that or distancing himself from that would have been unsustainable. Lately, of course, he's embraced it fully. Lately, he has, I think, shed any sense that he found it all distasteful. Talking about deporting people, telling lies about the true nature of the Rwanda scheme, changing the law, as it were, to render the word unsafe to mean safe, as Ken Clarke put it, of course, who's in the news for all the wrong reasons at the moment with the Post Office inquiry, but with the infected blood scandal. But as Ken Clarke put it, you might as well change the meaning of the word cat to the word dog. But the Tory media have let it slide, and Sunak seems to have jumped in with it. 10:43 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'll read this critical text from Rob. It says, "Why is your question so weighted? I love your show, but this question is overly leading. What happens if we still have a gloss for Rishi?" Well, Rob, if you still have a gloss for Rishi, you can ring me and tell me why on 0345 606 0973. It's not overly weighted, the question. It's coming from my own opinion, is that it's all gone horribly wrong for Rishi Sunak for the reasons that I listed at the top of the show. But you are absolutely always actively encouraged to challenge my opinions on the programme, especially when my opinions have informed the question that I'm asking. You think Rishi Sunak is still glossy, and by glossy I mean actual gloss, metaphorical political gloss, not the sort of temporary rainwater gloss that he was wearing on earlier this week, wearing on Wednesday. Then tell me what it is. What does the gloss look like now? 10:44 is the time. Folayan is in Sevenoaks. Folayan, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello,
I think it's a great conversation you're having here.
Thank you.
I think it's also a very British thing to complain about the government of the day.
Well, I think most countries do it as well, don't they, if they're allowed to?
Yeah. I don't support the Tories, and I'm not very keen about Labour either.
Okay.
But the one thing that I know for sure is that 49 days later, we ran to this guy, and it's just been bashing from time and over again. Your handlers asked me questions about what he's done right.
Oh, yeah.
I do agree he has a lot of wrong policies in place, a lot of things that I wouldn't support. For example, the Rwanda saga, I'll call that. That's not great. Also having to get, skilled help and then choosing not to bring their dependents into the country because that doesn't make any sense.
No.
But when I look at the arguments, I just feel like, he's inherited a government that obviously hasn't been doing well. I know he's a conservative, but at the same time, I mean, what he's done what he can do, and he's doing that now. So I don't expect that he's the best candidate for everyone. But yes, he has done things that has helped.
What?
And,
as Prime Minister, not as Chancellor, what has he done?
As Prime Minister, right,
and also
now,
the things he did as Chancellor didn't help. We've got to be. I mean, furlough did most people, but Eat Out to Help Out was an absolute disaster. Biologically, medically.
You said followed it.
Yeah.
Why don't you give him the credit for follow? I
just did twice. So what's he done as Prime Minister?
It's always skewed.
I just said furlough was brilliant.
As Prime Minister, he's. I mean, we've been talking about the boats, and obviously there's been a lot of distractions in the last couple of months.
Yes.
I mean, James, listen, I'm not on Rish's side.
I know. I'm going to let you speak, but at the end of what you're saying now, I'm going to ask you again what he's done as Prime Minister that's good.
Well, there's inflation that's halving at the moment.
That's nothing to do with him.
Well, it's getting better.
There's nothing to do with him, unless, of course, it was...
Well, it's under his government, right?
No, because it went up. So was it entirely his fault when it went... Are you saying that everyone who has had to sell their house because they can't afford their mortgages, that was all on Rishi Sunak?
Was that under Rishi Sunak?
Yes.
Or was that like Liz Truss's...
He was Prime Minister when the tide went out.
No.
Inflation, mate, you can't claim...
He inherited that.
You can't claim that he brought inflation down.
To him 49 days after. I'm not a Tory.
I'm going to let you talk, and then I'm going to let you talk, and then I'm going to point out how silly you are
about these things. But he inherited these things.
No, he didn't.
You've given him the responsibility to run the government.
Rishi Sunak stated that rocketing inflation had nothing to do with him. It was all about international factors.
Is, we're going to get.
Don't change the subject. Don't change the subject. Do not change that. Don't you dare change the subject.
We're going round and round in circles.
No, we're not.
It's going to happen with Keir Starmer.
We're not going round and round in circles. You're launching a skeet into the sky, and I'm blowing it to smithereens with my 12 ball.
We go on and on and on and on. But what do you want him to do?
I want you to tell me. I want you stop talking and let me interrupt you. For heaven's sake. I want you to tell me what he's done as Prime Minister that is impressive. And you can't have inflation because he literally told you that he has no control over inflation when it went through the roof. So what else is left?
No, but I'm just asking, has that gotten better under his government?
No, I'm asking what he's done that you celebrate, not what has happened. You might as well talk about the weather, although that obviously hasn't worked out for him very well this week either.
So, wait 1 second. I'll just give you a quick explanation on how it affects me personally.
No, you won't. Right? You will tell me what he's done as Prime Minister that we should all be celebrating.
But that's what I'm trying to explain, right?
Well, you're not doing a very good job. I'm going to give you one more chance. I'm late for the break.
Look at the support for Ukraine, for example.
Yes.
That's happened.
Yes.
Right? That's one. Look at the fact that, personally, I'm getting more money because of the reduction of NI. That's happened under his government.
There you go. You got one. We got there in the end. A reduction in national insurance. Why didn't you just say that in the first place? We could have spared everybody all that toing and froing. A reduction in national insurance. Vote Sunak. 10:52 is the time. Helen Hodinott is here and has been keeping a very close eye on events at the Post Office inquiry, which is getting pretty fruity, Helen.
It is. It really started off quite fiery in this opening hour of questioning this morning. Edward Henry Casey, the lawyer representing some of the postmasters, is questioning former Post Office boss Paula Venables. Obviously, his clients have been watching the last 2 days of their evidence, we know, with some frustration. And he opened in a way that was very eviscerating.
There were so many forks in the road, but you always took the wrong path, didn't you?
After 2 days of...
That's
yes,
office.
Yeah, no,
Sorry,
he knew that he was going to, make us take the stage and go straight in there. And it was after 2 days of probing but polite questioning by the inquiry's lead counsel, Jason Beer Casey, and the change of tack was quite startling to watch.
You exercised power with no thought of the consequences of your actions, despite those consequences staring you in the face.
I wasn't working alone in this. I was surrounded by colleagues, as the inquiry has seen, and I believed that we were doing the right things, and clearly that was not always the case.
Well, straight off the bat, Mr Henry brought up the case of one sub-postmaster, Mr Castleton, who was taken to trial at a cost of hundreds of thousands of pounds over a shortfall at his branch.
You instigated no investigation into why £321,000 of public money was used to crush him and grind him into the dirt.
I agree with what you're saying.
Thank you.
Well, Mr Henry then brought up conversations Paula Venables had with her husband over email in 2013. These were looked at in the inquiry yesterday, and they discussed different, less negative-sounding words to call bugs that had been flagged in the software, to call them things like anomalies instead. Mr Henry today suggested that she ignored the dangers of these, the dangers that these bugs represented. He said that she was warned about them in 2014, but says that exchange suggests that she didn't know about them before then.
You should have been horrified.
I was concerned by the bugs. There was...
You did nothing.
Well, Mr Henry, let her finish, please.
So be it, sir.
At that stage, I only had the information of those two bugs. What I've said on this so far is all that I knew at the time, and really all that I can say. And I repeat again, we should have said bugs.
You have no one to blame but yourself. Do you agree?
Where I made mistakes and I made the wrong calls, whether or not I had, in those cases where I didn't have information, I think that's more difficult. But where I had information and I made the wrong calls, yes, of course.
Well, Mr Henry then turned his attention to his thoughts on her accounts of the events that she has submitted to the inquiry. His clear frustration at her repeated claims of not being aware or not being able to remember are plain to hear.
I suggest to you that you still continue to live in a cloud of denial, and it persists even to today, because you have given in 750 odd pages a craven, self-serving account, haven't you? I didn't know. Nobody told me. I can't remember. I wasn't shown this. I relied on the lawyers.
I have tried to do this to the very best of my ability. I have taken, as I hope the inquiry has seen, all of the questions I've been asked. I have answered them honestly, no matter how difficult or how embarrassing or how wrong I was at the time.
Well, yeah, you can hear the frustration there, and also the fact that she's been accused already of trying to shift blame away from herself, reflect that blame. And it does sound like that despite this kind of more direct form of questioning, she's still doing that today.
You could hear audible gasps, couldn't you, from some of the sub-postmasters who were assembled in I don't know if it's an annex or a side room, at her attempts to claim she couldn't remember things, which is, of course, always impossible to prove. Nobody can prove whether or not somebody else can remember something that they're saying that they can't remember. And in a sense, they're both right at the end there, both the cross-examining lawyer and Venables herself, when he describes the catalogue of obfuscation, and she claims that she has tried to answer most of the questions honestly. Are there any consequences? I mean, what do we know? What the remit of the inquiry is? Do we know what powers, if any, it has to impose sanctions or punishment?
Well, interestingly, Alan Bates, who's obviously one of the lead campaigners, he said on Wednesday when Paula Venables started her evidence that he has no sympathy for her. She obviously broke down a number of times that day in tears. She said sorry dozens of times during that hearing. He said that he actually met with senior Metropolitan Police staff on Wednesday morning to discuss possible prosecutions following the scandal. So, I mean, it's very serious what is being discussed. And she, of course, knows that every single word that she says over these 3 days of evidence will be noted down and could have consequences in the future.
Yeah, nicely put. I don't know the law. I mean, I'm just thinking about sort of complicity in a miscarriage of justice, because some of the stuff that's emerged in emails about what they knew and what they feared, but I think more so yesterday, Helen, the PR advisor saying, oh, God, no, don't do that, because it would be front page news, when she suggested going back over myriad convictions, looking for evidence of wrongful conviction, wrongful imprisonment, of course, in many cases. And he said, no, you can't do that. He effectively said it would be a PR disaster.
Yeah,
and she said, I'll take that steer.
Yeah, he called it a ballistic impact. And she replied to him, warning her against that, saying, you're right to call this out. I'll take that steer, as you say. She said, no issue. And she's been accused again today of being obsessed by the media, obsessed by the keeping, the reputation of the post office safe over her care for the sub-postmasters.
What was the name of the PR? Have you got it in front of you? Is it there?
Yeah, Mark Davies. He is the post office's PR manager.
I can't help thinking that Alan Bates would probably want us to name check that character. Helen Hodinott, thank you very much indeed. That was incredibly helpful. Do you think you'll come back today or later on the schedule on LBC? Because
it's still happening,
it's
and there is still
on.
It's still very dramatic each minute. So I'm sure it will.
Indeed, thank you. It's coming up to 11 o'clock. Still some people waiting to put forward their theories on the disappearing gloss of Rishi Sunak, but I want to turn your attention next to the flaws of Keir Starmer, the potential flaws. Talked a lot about his mission being to carry a Ming vase across an ice rink or a polished dance floor. What might trip him up in the coming 6-week election campaign? I don't take anything for granted, ever, in politics. So what might turn the polls on their head? You know, when we stumble across a clip that we find almost transportingly delightful, and I have a habit, and I think you like it, of playing it quite often. And often the clips that we play quite often are clips that are funny and involve politicians being unintentionally funny. I don't know, we probably should have kept a list at some point of our favourite clips, but there have been clips that I have played out. Occasionally it seemed on an almost endless loop. I can't remember whether we had a clip of self-styled hard man of Brexit, Steve Baker, describing himself as the hard man of Brexit. We must have had a clip of Steve. We definitely played that a lot, didn't we? Because you can't do that. That's like having a sign up saying you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. You can't describe yourself as the hard man of Brexit. You have to wait for other people to do that. It's like those kids at college who came up with their own nicknames. They'd come into the college bar and say, have no fear, Jimbo's here. And no one called them Jimbo, or no one called them Davo or whatever it was. You can't invent your own nicknames, and you can't invent your own sobriquets. You can't call yourself hard man of Brexit, Steve Baker. But he said something to the inimitable and brilliant Victoria Derbyshire, I think yesterday, that for my money puts the self-styled depiction of himself as a hard man of Brexit in the shade. What I'm actually saying to you is I think Steve Baker has embarrassed himself even more on tape than he did when he called himself hard man of Brexit. I think this is the funniest thing I've ever heard a politician say with a straight face. And then what you need to grasp is the absolute seriousness and the speed of his response. Because this is the pedestrianisation of Norwich city centre territory, all right? And the seriousness with which he provides the answer. So it's not so you'll hear the question in a minute, and it's not as if he goes, I don't know, maybe this, maybe that. Oh-dooby-dooby-doo. I like a little friendly, warm speculation. It's like he's actually given it loads of thought. It's like he's known that at some point he was going to be asked this question, and he said to himself, well, I better have an answer ready. And then, for my money, quite incredibly, when he's decided that he better have an answer ready to this question, this is the answer that he had prepared.
Only the Conservative Party can stand for freedom and sort out the problems that we face.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
Pardon?
Only the Conservative Party can stand for freedom and sort out the problems that we face.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
Are we 100% sure that's not a deep fake? It's not AI or something like that. It's not been put together. Because a few people, getting ready for the question I'm about to ask about what could possibly go wrong for Keir Starmer, a few people are suggesting that some sort of sophisticated deep fake could be halfway around the world before the truth has got its trousers on. I mean, once more, perhaps?
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
I think I'm going to add that to my vocabulary. So you will hear me on occasion, if I'm asked a question and the opportunity presents itself, you will hear me answer that question by saying skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran racing. What? What? Funnier than when he called himself hard man of Brexit, or not quite as funny as... I think it's funnier than when he called himself hard man of Brexit, isn't it? Isn't it? Speaking of funny, hearing sort of Boris Johnson, Brexit, Liz Truss cheerleaders suddenly pretending deep concern at the political fortunes of Diane Abbott this morning has been quite diverting. Listen, make no mistake, Keir Starmer has questions to answer about what's going to happen to Diane Abbott, and indeed those questions should be asked with reference to Natalie Elphicke, a question of how the Labour Party can be a welcoming place for Natalie Elphicke and not a welcoming place for Diane Abbott are questions that Keir Starmer should be asked. What he can't do is answer questions about Diane Abbott's fate. That will be decided by the inquiry that I think will report in the next few days. And it speaks of a desperation to find something that lands on Keir Starmer. The bit I wasn't aware of until I just heard that clip there of Nick's show was this business about having TV debates, having 6 TV debates. It's just stupid. The election is 6 weeks away. The schedules will be tight. It'd be nice to have some TV debating, wasn't it? It was in the news bulletin, the clip from Nick's show in the news bulletin. So you've got Rishi Sunak, who literally nobody elected, saying that Keir and also, of course, who was Chancellor of the Exchequer to Boris Johnson, who hid in a fridge rather than be interviewed by a journalist, somehow trying to portray a ludicrous suggestion that we can have 6 debates in 6 weeks as something that Keir Starmer is frightened of. So, I mean, it all brings to mind that curry that they had in Durham, doesn't it? And that desperation to make things stick. A couple of people pointing out the right-wing media will probably do their damnedest to hurt him, but that's not an answer to the question of what might hurt him. What would they use as their weapons? So where do Keir Starmer's vulnerabilities lie? And you can come at this, I think, from either angle, either someone who hopes that he is the next Prime Minister and somebody who really hopes that he isn't. What are his key vulnerabilities in the 6 weeks that will follow? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Because, I mean, obviously, if I'm right, then some of your suggestions might sound a bit desperate. But, this is a very broad church. I'll happily take the suggestions that you may not think sound a bit desperate, but I may conclude that they do. Because that's the point, isn't it? What can they hit him over the head with? You've got Rishi Sunak hitting him over the head with the idea that he hasn't got a plan. Manifesto will be published in about 2 weeks, and Rishi Sunak is the man who didn't have an umbrella when he was standing in the pouring rain. So that just gifted Keir Starmer the mother of all comebacks. Every single time Rishi Sunak says he hasn't got a plan, Keir Starmer will say, I'm not going to take lessons in having a plan from a bloke that stood in the rain without an umbrella. And it might be a little bit glib, but it's funny and it works very well. And he's got better over the last couple of years. As Natasha Clark has pointed out frequently, he's got better at being lighthearted. He's got better at being funny. So using Currygate as a sort of precedent, and there are reports today that the inquiries into Angela Rayner's 10-year-old housing arrangements and £1,500 putative capital gains tax are about to go the same way as Currygate as well before the election actually happens. Using Currygate as the precedent, and let's look. I mean, I suffer a little from footballification. I'm not going to be a huge cheerleader for Keir Starmer necessarily, but I certainly make no bones about the fact of believing that the current incumbents have brought the country to its knees, and the sooner someone else can have a go, the better. But even against that backdrop, I recognise maybe I'm seeing things that are not quite as clear to you as they are to me, and maybe that's because of the strength of the lenses in my rose-tinted spectacles. But it seems to me that if they're bringing up Diane Abbott and theoretical TV debates as things with which to hit Keir Starmer, they're really bloody worried about not having anything to hit Keir Starmer with. So what would you... Well, first question, actually, what would you hit him with? 0345 6060 973. If you were literally advising Rishi Sunak on Keir Starmer's Achilles heels, I know technically you can only have two Achilles heels, and I think Achilles himself only had one. But you take my point. What were the chinks in Keir Starmer's armour? There you go. That rhymes as well. The Starmer armour kinks. Chinks. The chinks in Keir Starmer's armour. If you were advising, what would you do? 0345 6060 973. And then on a more broad basis, what do you think the vulnerabilities are? Speaking as someone who wants him to be Prime Minister, what do you think his vulnerabilities are? Because we're 6 weeks out now from a general election that pretty much everybody expects him to win, including some publicly, all privately, including the Tories, including, I think, Rishi Sunak, frankly. I think, as I've said to you a few times, I think Rishi Sunak actually wants him to win. But as we look down that 6-week-long road, what possible obstacles, pitfalls, potholes, brick walls, cliff edges might Keir Starmer encounter? Because this is a man that the right-wing media have tried to attack for buying a field in which his disabled mother could keep distressed donkeys and then turning a profit when he sold it. Somehow being involved in the failure to prosecute Jimmy Savile, who, of course, Margaret Thatcher was a close friend of. So again, not only is the accusation untrue, but the provenance of the accusation from Tory MPs is shall we say, suboptimal. And finally, having a perfectly legal and innocuous curry with colleagues after campaigning in County Durham. There were 13 Daily Mail front pages about that. And they learnt nothing because they've adopted precisely the same tactics when going after Angela Rayner. So those are the areas that they have proved themselves so desperate to identify Achilles' heels. Those are the areas they've ended up in so far. Today, we see them suddenly pretending to care about Diane Abbott's fate and pretending to believe that 6 TV debates in 6 weeks is in any way feasible or something that a sensible leader with a 20-point lead would even consider. So what would it be? Where would the vulnerabilities be? We come at this from either angle, either the vicious Gordon Tucker, Alistair Campbell, spin doctor. You are in charge of advising Rishi Sunak on where Keir Starmer's soft areas are, where you should really exert the pressure. Where are the pressure points? Where are the chinks in the armour? Where is it going to be? Let's get him. Let's get him on this, boss. 0345 6060 973. And then regardless, or even perhaps especially if you want him to be Prime Minister, what do you think the vulnerabilities might be? I'll give you one as a starter for 10, and that's Gaza. But I want you to explain why you think that's an Achilles heel for Keir Starmer. I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but it might prove to be quite a big one. We can examine that together, but also look for lots of other answers to the question of what could go wrong for Keir Starmer.
Only the Conservative Party can stand for freedom and sort out the problems that we face.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
Jousting, competitive pike fishing, bungee jumping. This list is endless. 18 minutes after 11 is the time. What might go wrong for Keir Starmer? What has already gone wrong for Keir Starmer? What might trip up what appears at the moment to be a relatively easy path to Downing Street? And do you know, in case you think I'm exaggerating when I say that privately and even publicly, even Tory MPs and Tory supporters are talking as if Starmer's victory is a foregone conclusion, which I would caution against. But just in case you think I'm exaggerating, the Daily Telegraph runs a piece today about how people like me are going to be out of a I don't know what the correct word would be. We're going to be the end of a lucrative era for the Tory bashing influencers. So even the Daily Telegraph is writing an article about how all of the people who have achieved a degree of prominence by pointing out how awful the politicians championed by the Telegraph are. Telegraph's now writing an article about how our days are numbered, which demonstrates a fairly profound failure to understand how radio works. But I guess Telegraph's going to telegraph. There's the headline. Election threatens the end of a lucrative era for the Tory bashing influencers. Quite a nice photograph of me, actually, in my aquascutum raincoat. So thanks for using that, whoever's on the picture desk. There is one absolutely outrageous slur in that article, though, which I'm consulting my lawyers about as we speak. It says I've written 2 best-selling books. Everyone knows I've written 3. Peter's in Banstead, in Surrey. Peter, problems for Keir Starmer, please.
Yes, good morning, James.
Good morning, Peter.
Usual thing, first-time caller, extremely nervous.
It's only me.
Long-time listener.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just think there are 2 things that have really got to me over the last few months. One is quite simply the response to Gaza, the early response to Gaza.
Yes. When
Starmer said that, there was an entitlement to basically deny energy and water and basic human needs to the Palestinians. Yes. And the other is, I've forgotten what the other one is.
That's all right.
Hang on. Give me a moment.
I will. Did you jot it down? Or we can talk about the first one if you want.
Can we talk about the first one?
And then hope that the second one... That's what I do sometimes. If you ever hear me say, Peter, on the radio, there are 3 reasons why I think this, then I'm buying myself time to remember what the third reason is.
Yeah, I've remembered it.
There you go. I knew you would.
Sorry. Yes, I should have written it down. Writing nothing down is, at my age, not a good idea.
What is the second one?
The second one is simply, it's not simply, but it's the two-child rule.
Okay. Well, I've heard him answer both of those, and I don't know whether you heard him today offer support.
I did hear him this morning, and that actually had me shouting at the radio, I'm afraid. And I normally only do that for Conservatives.
For right-wing people. So his argument is that, we're going to inherit a terrible economic situation, and the 2-child cap, as well as the tuition fees things, are simply not something we can afford in the first term. So I'd give him the benefit of the doubt on that.
Yeah, what really got to me this morning, James, was when he was asked when he was pressed on it, he said, he went through some things that they were doing around, to sort of shift the scene around on that issue.
Yes.
But he then said, we have a child poverty strategy. And I thought that was straight out of the Tory playbook, really, where you obfuscate by talking about a strategy rather than saying, this is a real issue we've got to deal with, because there are children now, parents making choices about which ones they can feed when.
Yes.
And I just, my wife, I've always been a Labour supporter. We used to live in the 70s in Lewisham. We canvassed, I walked the streets, I did all sorts of stuff. And we've moved out to Leafy, Surrey, and, we got Failing Grayling as our as our representative, so-called. It's not easy here, really, to persuade anybody of anything, and they all, they look at us strangely over their telegraphs. But we have a very good life, but I do not like the idea that we can kind of neutralise those serious issues about child poverty. I've been in education all my life as an my employment life.
Yes.
And you see what happens. My wife, we've worked in areas where, poverty is just so visible with the children arriving in school. And I think that having a strategy is not about saying, we will do this and we will do this soon. And if it means we shift some of the tax burden, we'll do that. I know how cautious Rachel Reeves is being on all of that stuff, and, not frightening the horses and the Ming vase and all that. But basically, they've got to be more assertive about children.
On poverty in particular. So, because we know that the VAT on private school fees is going to happen very quickly, and that they reckon that will bring 4,000 new teachers into schools, but that doesn't address poverty. Would you? I mean, the manifesto might give what you're hoping for, in terms of meat on the bones of the strategy, as it were.
Absolutely, but the problem is, that's almost like what I suppose Theresa May would have called a red line or a blue line. I don't know. Where he said it now. And how is he going to say, we will shift that third child issue?
We'll do this, we'll do that. I like that. Is it possible?
And that's a big one for people.
No, I can tell it is. Is it possible that he is prioritising the pursuit of the people looking at you askance over their daily telegraphs than he is on the votes of people like you?
Sorry, James. As with the Gaza thing, it is. It's something you lose. That's not just about Palestinians or Arabs or any ethnicity issues. That is also about people like us who say, I'm not comfortable with that. And it's not, I want anybody, we will support Labour. We will support Starmer.
Right.
I think the man has enormous integrity, but I think that area of lack of judgment in those issues is really making, I just feel a bit queasy. We will go out. We've decided what we've got to do. We've got to contact the local party, do some stuff here. But, it's just my enthusiasm for it is...
What a thoughtful contribution. Thank you. I mean, you're not quite what I was looking for. I'm very glad you rang in, because I was looking... because these are not things that are likely to trip him up, are they? These are things that have already, if you like, soured your enthusiasm, soured your support.
Yeah, but I can't believe that I'm the only person who's really troubled by those things and just...
Well, you're not. You're clearly not. You're clearly not. You're probably one of the most articulate people who is troubled by those things, because you don't just want sort of, bitter Jeremy Corbyn fans lobbing rotten tomatoes at him over any issue at all. Not. But the Gaza stuff is significant. You heard him, I presume, today issue fairly unqualified support for recognising the Palestinian state without actually joining Norway, Ireland and Spain, or saying that he would, as Prime Minister, join Norway, Ireland and Spain in recognising a Palestinian state. So he's moved away from where he was on that first interview that he did with Nick Ferrari immediately after the October the 7th terror attack. And David Lammy on the findings of the International Criminal Court has moved much more in your direction than he might have done. But your points stand, and that is lifelong Labour supporters seeing grit in the oyster, as it were, but not enough to withdraw support. Thank you, Peter. You give me grounds actually to broaden the invitation into people like you. So not just things that might derail the Starmer bandwagon, but also things that mean you're not going to be jumping onto it with quite the alacrity and enthusiasm you, as a Labour supporter, would have expected to. You'd presume that a Labour juggernaut heading for Downing Street would be something you'd be cheering to the rafters. And Peter, although he'll be helping to propel it, will be doing so with quite a heavy heart, I think it's fair to say. Thank you, Peter. It's 11:26. John's in Kingston upon Thames. John, what do you think?
I'd like you to take you back to Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And how she was defeated by Donald Trump when he actually won an election.
Yeah.
And there was a deliberate social media campaign to stop Democrats voting Democrat. It was very devious. They micro-targeted particular ethnic groups. So black people were told Hillary Clinton doesn't support you, right. Similarly Hispanics, etc.
Yes,
and they were encouraged not to vote.
Yes.
And I think the Tories are going to do something very similar. They will have a micro-targeted social media campaign. Black people will be told, look how he treated Diane Abbott, blah, blah, blah. Muslim voters will be told, look at him, he doesn't support the Palestinians, blah, 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 don't vote Labour. All aimed, and of course left-wing Labour voters will be told, he's just another Tory. What's the point of voting?
And this will go on this will go on under cover of darkness. This will be micro-targeted social media, which of course helped deliver Brexit, and therefore it won't be happening in on this show. It won't be happening in plain sight.
No, you won't see it happening, and people won't realise how they're being targeted. Well, I think that's the big danger here, voter suppression deliberately. So they're not going to get people to change their minds and vote Tory. That's almost impossible. All they can hope for is to knock a few percentage points off the Labour votes in that sort of way.
I remember reading, it's a while actually, because American politics is so febrile, but I remember reading about this, and it was a real
subtle.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and it was very, very successful. That's the only reason he won. They managed to persuade black people to stay at home. He won these swing states based on this very subtle social media targeted campaigning.
Then we have to wonder whether it would work here. Also, I think, I could be wrong about this, but I think that the targeting would be much harder to do now, given the demise of Cambridge Analytica and the tightening up of some of the rules and the enormous fines that have been laid down on Facebook and others. But I mean, that aside,
I think you're being a bit naive.
I think I am as well.
If you think they haven't sorted that out over the last few years.
I think I am as well. But would it work, though? Is there a guarantee? Do you think that, because Dominic Cummings actually sort of gave the game away in a speech that he gave to a very small audience a few years ago, talking about physicists and directly hitting people's Facebook with, promises that if we could just get rid of the foreigners, then your Auntie Doris would get 2 new hips by tea time. Those sort of very, very micro-targeted messages for Brexit. So we know that they work, but these are broader. How would you persuade a black voter that Keir Starmer doesn't care about them? You've already mentioned Diane Abbott. That might have some leverage, but not if she's back in the fold by the election, which she might be.
Okay. Yeah, so that would be one way. Look how he treated her. 1 year left in the wilderness. He doesn't really care. He's just using it, etc., etc.
Yeah. I would like you to be wrong.
I
would like you to be wrong, John, but I think that's two absolute corkers of a cause.
The other thing here is the amazing fact of the number of desperately poor people who say they're all the same, I'm not going to be bothered to vote. And that is a successful strategy by the Tories, by the media in this case, which has disenfranchised millions of people in that way by basically persuading them they're all the same. And there's no point.
And that is obviously not true. But if you can persuade enough people that it is true, then lethargy becomes your friend. On the micro-targeting thing, John, have you had this on a simmer? Or did it just pop into your mind this morning when I asked the question?
No, it just popped into my mind. I remember I was just so horrified with what they did to Hillary Clinton and how they've done it.
Yeah, well, great remembering. And I hope Labour are listening, because, I hope the Tories aren't, in case they hadn't thought of this. And now you've just reminded them, John. And go, quick, get so-and-so on the phone, or get me that fella that we used for that thing last time. 11:30 is the time. Thomas Watts has your headlines. 11:34 is the time. James, your caller talking about micro-targeting is spot on. It's already started. I'm already receiving ads telling me that Rishi is great and Starmer is rubbish. A large proportion of people, of course, only get their quotes, news end quotes, through social media, and will be swayed by this nonsense. I think this will be an election unlike any other, and unfortunately it will not go as smoothly as those of us who want to see change would wish. I really think this is an area that needs to be exposed and explored further by yourself and your colleagues. I like that. I also like Colin in Chichester's response, which is not unlike mine, actually. Please, James, let's not have this conversation. We're only going to give them ideas. If you want to know a little more about what John was talking about, I shall tweet for you now. So if you follow at Mr. James OB on Twitter, I'm just reposting it now because it's from 2020. Channel 4, inevitably perhaps, did a magnificent investigation into exactly how 3.5 million black Americans were listed by Donald Trump's campaign as deterrents, in quotes, and the idea was indeed to target them with dissuasion from voting for Hillary Clinton. So it's an odd way to think about campaigning. It's an untraditional way to campaign. You're trying to get people to stay at home, like an even more subtle version of the Tory plan to try to disenfranchise people by bringing in voter ID for young people that old voters don't need. Or rather, old voters will find it a lot easier to come up with voter ID than young people would. That's a fascinating angle, a fascinating article, and probably at the top of the list of potential problems for Keir Starmer, albeit that they are, theoretical problems at the moment. Annie from Hornchurch speaks for many of us when she writes, the two mature gentlemen who have just called you are very sensible and they know very much about politics and would not be blindsided by the Tory woke stuff. I wonder if they are much wiser than most of the general public, wonders Annie. It's a great point. It's also a valid compliment for the quality of the first two calls. To Glasgow next. Cora is there. Cora, what do you think?
Hi, James.
Hello.
It's a pleasure to speak to you again. I'm going to admit that I've been listening for such a long time I've forgotten what the question is.
Yeah, this is a reflection upon my wordling around the place, isn't it? It's what are the potential problems for Keir Starmer moving forward?
Thank you.
In the next 6 weeks. It's Friday. Cora, it's been a long week. Peter couldn't remember his second point. You couldn't remember the question. Crikey. I'll tell you what we must do. We must get people to actually talk to the callers before they come on air in future so that we can introduce some sort of quality. Could carry on, Cora. I'm teasing. I'm not even teasing you. I'm teasing Eleanor. What would you like to say?
So I wanted to bring up a few points. And I think in terms of Keir Starmer and his principles, I think areas where he could face problems. And the first one is dropping the abolishment of the Lords.
Okay.
Because I feel like the last 5 years we've really been given an idea of what it's like when our democracy isn't safe or the checks and balances aren't really in place.
Yeah.
So for me, democratic restoration is like a really big thing. And abolishing the Lords was something it's free. He has no excuses for dropping that. And that really sort of gives me a bit of a wobble. The next one, they're all a little bit related in my head.
Go on.
And I'm going to be speaking from the perspective of a woman of colour.
Okay.
Not every person of colour will feel the same way or see things the same way. But for me, the defending free movement, the chat around Brexit, I think, was in some ways racist.
Yes.
In the way some people spoke. And I feel like dropping that's a big mistake. I also feel like he was talking to a different person this morning, doing the rounds, I won't say where.
Yes.
And he was asked about safe and legal routes for places like Afghanistan and Syria.
Yes.
And instead of answering the question about creating safe and legal routes, he sort of turned it around on the interview and was saying, well, I don't think anybody thinks it's compassionate to put people in small boats. The interviewer was not saying that. They were just asking about safe and legal routes.
I've heard him do that twice now, so to sort of duck the question on, in addition to shutting down these unsafe routes, what will you do to open up safe routes that the Tories have closed?
Exactly. And he didn't answer. And then the last one sort of related to that for me is the Diane Abbott, Natalie Elphicke scenario.
But you're like Peter. You are someone who is clearly a Labour supporter who has quibbles.
No,
these
I'm
are
a
not
Labour supporter.
Well, these are not concerns that are going to make you vote Tory, are they?
Oh, no, but I will be voting SNP. So,
Okay.
yeah, it has made me move to... I just don't think Labour are being brave enough. That's it. And I think Keir Starmer should hold on to his principles.
He has. I mean, he's still committed to the abolition of the House of Lords, but it won't be part of the legislative programme in the first term in Parliament. Well, the SNP will never have any power over the House of Lords in a million years,
Indeed.
will they?
No, they won't. But if they have enough MPs in Parliament, they maybe could push Labour to being a bit more radical, a little bit more creative.
It'll be good for democracy. We shall see. I think Scotland's going to be a fascinating battleground. But again, these are. I mean, what advice would we give the Tories if they wanted to hurt Keir Starmer? None of this ammo would really load a Conservative gun, would it?
Not a Conservative gun. Just
but an SNP
and I want to be clear. I'm not far left. I did support Jeremy Corbyn, but I realised my mistake after that 2019 loss.
It wasn't necessarily a mistake. I voted for Labour in 2019 because, I simultaneously knew how absolutely awful Boris Johnson would be, while sadly how absolutely hopeless Jeremy Corbyn's chances were of becoming. If I'd been Scottish, I probably would have voted SNP, actually, if I'd been in Scotland in 2019. But no one ever needs to apologise for having chosen the rock or the hard place in 2019. And I extend that generosity to Tory voters as well. It is 11:41. Thank you, Cora. Phil's in Crawley. Phil, what do you reckon?
Oh, hi there, James.
Oh,
Be
hello,
gentle
Phil.
with me.
Of course I will.
I'm not your normal demographic.
What does that mean?
Well, I'm highly uneducated. Let me put it that way.
No, you're not. You listen to this show.
Ah, well, yes, I'm rapidly becoming more educated.
You might not have formal educational qualifications. Nothing breaks my flipping virtue signalling woke heart more than to hear clever people describe themselves like that, Phil. My normal demographic is thoughtful people, and you're a thoughtful person, and here you are, and I'm very flattered that you've chosen to call me. What would you like to say?
Well, I think Keir's main problem could be his own MPs and councillors.
Okay.
There could be something more terrible happens in Gaza.
Yeah.
His MPs will be, rightly so, up in arms about it, but that isn't UK politics. And at the moment, UK people would expect his MPs to be concentrating on UK politics. And if that doesn't happen and they start going on about other things that we frankly have no control over, I think that will put the voter right off.
So if they go off-piste, as it were.
Yeah.
I mean, there's been problems with councillors, or even wasn't there an MP? There is an
Jess
MP.
Phillips, I think,
No, not Jess Phillips. The one who's currently an independent who went very off on a tangent. I mean, so that's party management, Phil. That's keeping a tight rein on MPs. There's a difference between talking about it, which everybody's doing, and saying something that would cause huge problems for the leadership. That's a real possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, he's just got to keep them under control and, and as you say, keep them on script. If they do start sort of going off and saying their own thing, I think he's going to...
Yeah, the loose cannons, as it were.
Absolutely, yeah, spot on, loose cannons, yeah.
Right,
yeah. As long as they're kept under control, I think he's probably going to, it's in the bag, really.
We shall see. Never say never. Before you go, I'm going to pick you up again on what you said at the beginning of this conversation.
Yeah.
About demographics. I'm going to mention a name to you of someone who is very, very highly educated, Phil.
Right.
And that name is Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Yes.
And I think I'm just going to leave it there, mate.
Thank you, James. I'll take that as a compliment.
You're supposed to. Thank you, Phil. This car just gone 11:44. And thanks also to James, who texted me to remind both Phil and I of how wrong it can sometimes be to equate education levels with intelligence levels, a principle of which Jacob Rees-Mogg has, of course, latterly become the patron saint. It is coming up to 11:45. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. In the next hour, what do you think is most exciting? Skydiving, motorcycling, or fast catamaran sailing? 11:47 is the time. There's also a rather good thing on Netflix, which Elsie's reminded me of, called The Great Hack, if you want to find out a little more about micro-targeting, which has been offered up as a very compelling possibility in answer to the question of what pitfalls might be ahead for Keir Starmer, although plenty of people have pointed out that it's not. I think with Brexit and with Donald Trump, the devil had all the best tunes on micro-targeting. The idea that the Democrats in America, or indeed the Labour Party here, would still be 100 miles behind the right on micro-targeting on social media is probably fanciful. But it's a question of how low, I guess, you are prepared to go. 11:48 is the time. You could have Smear Keir, the live show, suggests Carl. Everything that they say, like flip-flop or economic incompetence or Currygate, the Tories have already done the same, but bigger, James. It's over. And the only ones who think it isn't are the lunatics. I haven't really found anyone who doesn't think it's over yet. No one really could put much gloss on Rishi Sunak in the last hour. In the next hour, this probably won't work because we're such a miserable bunch of ingrates, aren't we? I'm toying with the idea of asking what you like about both candidates. What do you like about Rishi Sunak? What do you like about Keir Starmer? It's a toss-up at the moment between what do you like about the leaders of the two main parties, or what's more exciting, fast catamaran sailing, skydiving, or motorcycling? If you don't know why I'm asking that question, there's a very strong chance you'll find out before 1 o'clock. If you do know why I'm asking that question, there's a very strong chance you'll be hit over the head again with the same clip before 1 o'clock. And speaking of clips, I interviewed Salman Rushdie this week, for full disclosure, which I've been in this job for a long time now, and this industry. I've met a lot of famous people, and I think the day I'll start wondering whether it's time to hang up my headphones will be the day when I stop feeling almost childlike excitement at the prospect of meeting people who, in some cases, who were famous when I was a child, but not always. Sometimes I meet people who are younger than me and I get very excited. But I don't. I've now met Salman 3 times. Once on Zoom for a full disclosure episode we did during lockdown. Once over dinner, which was one of the most amazing experiences imaginable. And now this week, sitting down for an hour in the full disclosure studio and talking about his new book, Knife, which is a memoir built around the near fatal attack on him a couple of years ago, in which he lost his right eye. He's an incredible man. And the thing I really wanted to do in this interview was get his humour across, because he's such a funny man. He's a beautiful writer, obviously, but he's a hilarious writer. He's a very, very funny man, both in print and in person. But because, as we talk about in the interview, I don't know if this specific point is in this clip, if you've got a fatwa against you from some Islamist goon, which has prompted extremists across the world to want to kill you, and if that in the minds of many people is the thing with which you are most immediately associated, then it's kind of hard to bring much comedy into the conversation. So if you've read his books, you don't need me to tell you how funny he is. If you've seen him interviewed in length rather than in short, tight slots, and you don't need me to tell you how funny he is. But if his name is synonymous with the satanic verses, the Iranian ayatollahs and the fatwa, then you probably do need me to tell you what a light touch, what a deft touch, and what a funny man he is. And I really, really, really wanted to get that across in this interview.
Here's this kid of 24 with no criminal record, not on any terrorism watch list, just an ordinary kid of Lebanese origin growing up in New Jersey. And to go from that 0 point to murder is a very big jump. Especially when the person you choose to murder, by your own admission, is somebody you know nothing about.
A couple of YouTube videos.
Yeah, you don't know who he is.
Was that, I don't know what word to use here, but would it have been easier for you to understand if he'd known lots about you?
Well, at least it would have filled up a gap a little bit,
Yeah.
Because I just thought to murder a perfect stranger is a very strange decision. Not to feel curious about the person you've decided to kill. Or in other words, to be so receptive to a kind of rhetoric of demonization that somebody has filled your head up with, that you feel you know him, that this guy is just a terrible human being and needs to be got rid of, and you don't need to think further than that. But I think that's kind of what happened to him.
Because the language he uses in the interview you mentioned is a bit pathetic, really, isn't it? Using words like disingenuous to describe you. You think he's just
which he did.
Tried to stab you to death for being disingenuous.
He said disingenuous to he said when the New York Post asked him why he did it, he said, "Well, I thought he was a disingenuous individual." And I thought, well, if you want to kill everybody who's disingenuous, there's going to be a lot of people missing.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Just to drive home the point about humour, I don't know what the best example would be, but your contemplations on why he turned up with a bag full of knives as opposed to just one.
It's so bizarre,
isn't it?
That to bring one weapon into an auditorium is risky enough, but to bring like a rucksack full, what is that? What is that even? And I thought, was it that he wanted to make a last-minute decision for sort of aesthetic reasons, or did he want to pass them out?
Like a party game.
Yeah, join in. But it was, and he then confessed it. Like the arresting officer was giving evidence in one of the hearings, and he said that when he'd arrested him and was taking him to jail, the guy said, "I left my backpack in the auditorium." And the police officer, not unexpectedly, said, "Is there a bomb in the backpack?" And he said, "No, there's knives in it." And then they went and found the backpack. It was full of knives.
Absolutely chock-a-block.
Just stunning. I mean, and I don't understand. Even now, I don't understand it.
No. He understands a lot, though, about that incredible experience and the aftermath. And it is all in the new book, which is called Knife, and which I really cannot recommend highly enough. You read it in one sitting. It's just an extraordinary assault on the senses, undertaken by one of the finest writers ever, I think, to have worked in the English language. It is 11:54. You can download that podcast at Global Player, and I'll play you another clip later as well because I'm that proud of it. John writes, can you suggest an entry-level Salman Rushdie novel? John in Reading, yeah, Midnight's Children, mate. I think all day long. But I mean, that maybe don't start with satanic verses, but otherwise you can't really go wrong. Midnight's Children's a thing of beauty. Didn't it win the Booker of Bookers as well? So that's like the most successful, adjudged to be the most brilliant book of the last 50 years or so. Back to Keir Starmer. Weaknesses, vulnerabilities, Achilles' heels, potholes on the path to power. Oh, that's nice. Potholes on the path to power. Lloyd's in Bristol. Lloyd, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me on.
You're very welcome,
I just quickly wanted to say a huge thank you to you and your producers on behalf of my nan, who has been a lifelong Labour supporter. And I promised her that I would thank you.
Oh, how lovely. What's her name?
You, Anne Biddick.
Thank you, Anne. How lovely.
She described you as a canary in the mines, and that you gave her views a voice, and that she was glued to your radio when she lost her sight. So thank you for keeping her mind young with your diverse views.
Gosh, thank you. How lovely. Thank you.
Yeah. So I will.
You're not going to spoil it now, are you, Lloyd?
No. I was saying that because I forgot what I was going to say. No. My theory is possibly that Keir Starmer is an incredibly stoic man, and I think one of his weaknesses is potentially his ability to inspire when he speaks. He's quite stoic, whereas if you listen to sort of Angela Rayner or Wes Anderson, they are
Wes Streeting. I'm a big fan of Wes Anderson, but I don't think he's on the Labour front bench yet.
Wes Streeting. When they speak, they are incredibly emotive when they speak, and I think that what the Conservatives might do is try and upstage him by saying, or try and make him look the weaker orator. Even though I think he's steadying the ship, they both, I feel, when they speak, I just feel inspired by them, but not so much when Keir speaks.
If they're listening to this, then they'd take that as a criticism, wouldn't they? One of the problems Keir Starmer's got is that I find some of his senior colleagues so inspiring. That's not bad for a party that's aiming for Downing Street, but I do know what you mean. What you mean. They seem to have, just more rhetorical nous, I think.
That's all it is, but it doesn't necessarily look so good if they wanted to spin it that way. I think that they could make it look like he's weaker and they're stronger.
Who's a better speaker than him and Sunak is probably might be a more important comparison. Who because neither of them are showboaters, are they? Neither of them are show ponies.
Correct.
Who was the last great speaker in Parliament, do you think?
Oh God.
I like Rayner. I think Rayner has something that you're right to identify.
I'm a big fan of the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes. Whenever he speaks,
you're not risking the surname this time.
I've forgotten it, but Wes Street. But every time he speaks, I think it's so eloquent,
yes,
and
fair enough.
It's inspiring to listen to.
I like that. I mean, as I say, we're struggling to come up with really hefty weapons with which to hit him, but the quibbles and criticisms alike, things that the Tories could capitalise upon. Thank you, Lloyd, and thank you so much for your kind words from your gran, and thank you to Anne as well. Des isn't happy. He says, "Pardon me while I'm sick in my mouth with all the sycophancy this morning." Des, you can ring. I mean, first of all, swallow, and then ring in and tell me what you think Keir Starmer's weaknesses are, because if you're sitting there getting angry, then that's probably because you can't think of any. Do you see what I mean? I always like to take the exchange with people on their way into Idiot's Corner, I always like to take it a little further than they expected. So what you're really cross about is not the fact that people ringing in to offer up criticisms of Keir Starmer sound sycophantic to you, which is obviously a bit stupid. But what you're really cross about is that you can't think of anything. And yet you've probably still got your Tory scarf tied so tightly around your neck that you're thinking, how can I not think of any? Why have I not got anything to throw at Keir Starmer? Maybe it's your fault. Up next, fast catamaran sailing. What exactly is it? 3 minutes after 12 is the time. I'm tempted to ask you how something as awful as what's happened at the post office can happen, but I think well, I'm not here next week, am I? I just think we should wait for it to end. I think we should wait for it to end before we do that, so you've got all of the details in front of you. It might be a question Lewis Goodall tempt you with next week. And also, I did say at the top of the show, I know I never ever keep promises that I mention at the top of the show, that we'd have three hours of politics to see us into the weekend together. I'm going to leaven this hour slightly with a question that we will file under what we like to call on the programme a side order. We're going to have a side order of Steve Baker, a side order of Brexit hardman Steve Baker. If you're just tuning in, wondering why we're talking about the self-styled hardman of Brexit, I think we'll do the full clip of this. It's only about 7 seconds long. Here he is.
Only the Conservative Party can stand for freedom and sort out the problems that we face.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
Why fast catamaran sailing? So Eleanor thinks he's done this on purpose. She thinks it's some sort of deliberate game of 3D chess and that he's actually setting people who are going to mock him, setting them up for a fall. I'm not so sure about that. But why fast catamaran? I mean, surely if you're sailing a catamaran well, it's going to go quite fast anyway. Fast. That's so Partridge, isn't it, that bit, that fast catamaran. So I wouldn't say any of these things, even if I did them, because I think he sounds ridiculous. What are you going to do if you lose your seat in the House? Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing. But if you'd said skydiving, and if you'd said it like this, it's a bit skydiving, motorcycling. I love motorcycling, Victoria, and I'm a big fan of catamaran sailing, possibly even in races. But he has to say fast catamaran sailing, skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing. Maybe someone can tell us why you would add fast to that description. So what I'm looking for this hour, and I'm not taking any imposters or fraudsters, right? I want to speak to someone who has done all three of those things. So I would have thought, in ascending order of likelihood, it's not going to be very hard to find someone who's been motorcycling. I say that with great confidence. I've even done it myself. Similarly, quite a lot of people have been skydiving. How do you know that? Because they're always asking you to sponsor them, aren't they? And do you know what that means if you sponsor someone to go skydiving? It means you're paying for them to go skydiving and they'll give the change to charity. That's what it means. I don't want to sound unkind or ungrateful, but that is what I looked into it, and they don't pay for the skydive themselves. They pay for the skydive out of the donations and then they give the change to charity. I know not everybody does that. I don't want to scupper everybody's skydiving plans. But a lot of people have done it. I know that because I've sponsored a lot of people. And I encourage you to do the same. Catamaran sailing is a category of its own, but that's not good enough for this phone-in, all right? It has to be fast catamaran sailing. And you have to also be qualified to tell us what the difference is between mere catamaran sailing and fast catamaran sailing. The kind of catamaran sailing that you only do if you're also a skydiver and a motorcyclist. It has to be all three. Do not clog up my switchboard telling us that you once rode a motorbike. I don't care, all right? Similarly, skydiving. Great, zippity-doo-dah, but it's not good enough for this phone-in. I want to hear from you if you've done all three. What all three, I hear you say? Well, that's easy. I'll tell you exactly what. All three of these.
What do you want to do if you're not an MP?
Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing.
That's the clip I was sent. It sounds like he might carry on. Jousting, competitive pike fishing, bungee jumping. What else would be on the list? So that's what I want. Only if you've done all three. All right? 0345 606 0973. And I don't think we're going to dedicate the entire hour to this. Partly because I'm looking for just one person that's done all three of those things. Skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran sailing. And now you are, I think, inevitably making suggestions of other things that might be on his list. Roddy goes for hippo wrestling. Zoe says, I kept thinking you were saying Caitlin Moran sailing. Caitlin Moran sailing with Caitlin Moran. And quite a few of you pointing out, I think that the only person qualified to call you this hour might be Steve Baker. Well, if he rings in, I might give him a Ray Liotta. On the other hand, I might not. So now my phone line is absolutely chocker with people either misunderstanding the question or telling us that they've done one of these three things, or possibly we might get a be still my beating heart. Hang on a sec. Oh, this no, did we know that already? I've got some great news about Frost, the person responsible for negotiating Boris Johnson's Brexit deal. He's been banned from standing as a Tory MP. This is because there was speculation he might resign from the House of Lords in order to fight a seat, but he's been told he can't apply to be the Tory candidate in any of the seats where there is a vacancy. We don't know why, but the Daily Telegraph is reporting this. Very trustworthy newspaper today. Carries a fascinating piece about how the election threatens the end of a lucrative era for the Tory bashing influencers. A wonderful picture of my new colleague at Global, Marina Purkis, who's a podcast with Gemma Forte. The Trawl is joining the Global stable next week. But Lord Frost has been banned from stand. Natasha Clark's on a drip at the moment, trying to restore her energies after a 24-hour uninterrupted shift. So I don't know who can talk to me about this. Can anyone talk to me about this? Do we know why Lord Frost? Is it for the obvious reason? Because he's a blithering idiot? But that hasn't disqualified any other people from being able to stand as Tory MPs. Lord Frost has been banned from standing as a Tory candidate at the general election, which is, however you cut it, absolutely hilarious. OK, here's what I want to do. While keeping the phone lines open for anyone who's done all three, skydiving, motorcycling, fast catamaran racing, not Caitlin Moran racing. You can't race Caitlin Moran. There's only one. How can you have a Caitlin Moran race if there's only one Caitlin Moran? We're going to turn the first two topics on their head now. Okay, so rather than looking for the reasons why it's all gone wrong for Rishi Sunak or what might go wrong for Keir Starmer, we're going to look next at what we like about them. And you may think that that's a bit unfair, given that it would probably be easier to come up with things that you like about Keir Starmer than it would about things that you like about Rishi Sunak. But that's on you. I want you to. I want you to tell me what you like about these two candidates. Going into the last election, the last general election, I don't mind who this upsets, to be honest with you, was absolutely awful. The combination of uselessness and awfulness was almost complete. The only real tension at the last election was how much will Boris Johnson win by, and how long will it take before people recognise his uselessness as well as his awfulness. The answer was quicker than even I expected, actually. Jeremy Corbyn, whose uselessness outweighed his awfulness, but the likelihood of him winning that general election in 2019 was zero. So I described it as like a choice between a rock and a hard place, or a choice between, you know, a kind of hair sandwich or a gravel ice cream. It was such a gross dereliction of democracy almost for both major parties to put up two such obviously and manifestly inadequate and unworthy candidates for the prime ministership, that if I didn't do it for a living, I think I probably would have turned away from the whole sorry fiasco in disgust. I think we can all agree that Rishi Sunak is a better candidate than Boris Johnson and Keir Starmer is a better candidate than Jeremy Corbyn. So, what do you like about 1, or both of those candidates. Okay, so we're going to get the phone lines open. Move quickly. Tell me what you like about Rishi Sunak on 0345 6060 973. I don't want any self-appointed comedians. It's genuine answers to a genuine question. We're going to be doing a lot of bashing. I'm sure we've done some already. So let's do a little bit of warmth and positivity. What do you like about Rishi Sunak? 0345 6060 973. And what do you like about Keir Starmer? 0345 6060 973. We're going to have a rare foray into undiluted positivity. It'll never catch on. It's a terrible business model, and I'd be out of a job by the end of the month if we were to do it on a regular basis. But I just want you to tell me what you like about these two men. And it's such a warm and welcoming embrace that I'm offering to you now. You can even do both at the same time. You can even ring in and say, well, what I like about Keir Starmer is ... And then tell you what I like about Rishi Sunak ... You can do it all. We're going to have an exercise in whatever the opposite of footballification is. We're going to burn our scarves. And we're going to come up with things that we like about both men. And when I say don't ring in if you're a self-appointed comedian, it can be a light-hearted suggestion, but it has to be genuine. You can't just be trying to dream up something that you think is funny. It has to be a genuine... Look, I'm not going to vote for him because of his hair, but I do actually really like his hair. So I could be talking about either of them now. I like Keir Starmer's quiff. I didn't used to. And on Wednesday, I was absolutely transfixed by Rishi Sunak's hair, which didn't seem to get wet at all, even as the rest of him was absolutely dripping. Would that be oil, do you think? Would he have had oil in his hair or some sort of product? But then you'd expect the rain to be globuling, wouldn't you? To be pooling on his hair, so that there'd be... Anyway, I digress slightly because Brad in Brighton's on the line. Can this be true, Brad?
Hey, James, buddy, I do all three.
No way. No way.
Ride a Harley, sail, and I've skydived here multiple times.
Yeah, but do you sail fast catamarans?
Right, so yeah, let me help you really quickly. So I sail like a 50-foot catamaran in Europe, Caribbean. They're not that quick, my friend. So I know you said, they must all be quick, because they weigh a lot. You could have 10 passengers on board. I mean, they weigh tons.
Okay.
The fast catamaran that Plonker's talking about is relating to kind of more like racing catamarans. You can get like a 28-foot.
So it is a distinction you would make in public then. You would say, I fast catamaran sailing. You wouldn't just say catamaran sailing.
Well, that's one language I can use. I think you sound like a bit of a plonker really to say that. I'd say I just want to go sailing.
Yeah, but this is a man who described himself as the hard man of Brexit, Brad. We're judging him by standards that we probably wouldn't apply to ourselves.
He sounds, by saying fast catamaran sailing, the closest analogy I have is saying it's like Mr. Bean is trying to be Bond.
Yes. Oh, I loved that. What's your favourite? What's your favourite out of the three?
Well, I like the skydiving for the adrenaline. I like the Harley, possibly a midlife crisis, because it's just a great feel. But if you want, I know you. I heard you on the line the other day speaking to someone, and you heard birdsong in the background.
Yes.
You said I don't have that where you live, and I think when you're at sea and you're on your own, you can't find peace like it. It's incredible. Get a bit of sun, swim, some nice rosé, and some good food. So sailing is great to calm the brain.
Skydiving to get the juices flowing.
Skydiving to remind you that you're alive, and the Harley to say, life's good.
Life is good. Have you ever done all three on the same day?
No, my friend, I haven't.
Well, you're no Steve Baker then, are you, Brad?
But you know what? I am related to the great man, Sir Ernest Shackleton.
Are you really?
I am a DJ. My name is Brad. I'm a motivational speaker in the business world, so I listen to you quite a lot, mate. Yeah, you either get me very excited before I go on stage, or you fire me up proper, sometimes for the wrong reasons. But
well, that's
I like the way you challenge the audience.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you, Brad.
Of
course you can.
Can I say one last thing? About what do I like about Rishi Sunak and all these other Tories? Yeah. I could have liked all of them, but unfortunately, I was one of them. The 3 million limited company directors, and when Rishi on the phone or in a conference of the day said that he'd done everything, as you well know, I've supported all these businesses. They didn't help. They didn't support me, and I was caring for my mother during COVID, and Mum sadly passed. She had cancer and lost her life to COVID. And I had an events business I was trying to run as well, and that shut down during COVID. And I asked my accountant, how can I get some help? And whilst everyone else is getting paid to go paddle boarding and enjoy life in the greatest heat wave of all time and getting paid for it, us apparently entrepreneurs that are so valuable to the economy and the industry, when we reached out for help multiple times, I felt like I was at sea with an anchor around my ankle, and they chucked us overboard. Now they want our vote, so I won't be ever voting Tory again.
That's a very good point. Very well made, although I'm not sure you fully entered into the spirit of telling me things that you like about Rishi Sunak.
Okay, seeing him get wet.
But again, no, this is not what we're looking for at all. But it doesn't matter because we found a motorcycling catamaran sailing skydiver, and his name is Brad from Brighton. Wow, it's 12:18. It is 20 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I like this. Where's it gone? This is what I mean. I'm not necessarily looking for earth-shattering compliments. I'm looking for just things that you like about Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. And I've lost it. Sue's, there it is. I like this. Rishi's an okay kind of guy. He's calm, intelligent and sensible. And that man can rock a suit like no one I've ever seen. I haven't seen what Derek Guy has had to say about him. That wonderful commentator on Twitter who is a menswear guru. But I don't understand the short trousers, but I do think he is quite stylish. They're both quite stylish, actually. Starmer started wearing glasses. Ben Kentish noticed this. I don't know if he told you. Starmer started wearing glasses. That must be deliberate. Makes him look more studious. And his quiff is about 40% of what it was when he first came to prominence as DPP and later as a Labour MP. When I was a younger man, I struggled to trust men who'd clearly spent a lot of time in front of the mirror doing their hair. But now I've not got very much hair. I've mellowed quite a lot, actually. In fact, today I'm almost experimenting. I was at the hairdresser's yesterday. I'm almost experimenting with a sort of miniature little quiff-like Starmerism. So I mean it. Nice things to say about either of them. 0345 6060 973. Frederick's in Kensington. Frederick, what would you like to say?
Hi. So back in 2000, I think it was, Rishi worked with me and in some ways for me when I was at Goldman Sachs. Okay. I was an analyst in the technology team there in doing investment banking. And Rishi was a summer analyst, so he was doing an internship. We worked together for 3 months. And I was deeply impressed by how smart he was, how diligent he was, incredibly down to earth, just a really good guy. And I've lost contact with him, haven't spoken to him since then. But it just registered with me that this was like one of the smartest, like young guys. He must have been 22 at the time.
That's nice.
That I've ever met. And when his name popped up, I think initially, or at least when I first saw him, he was somehow working in the Treasury Department. I was just happy to know that there are smart, capable, diligent people who are making their way into politics, and that you just feel that there's an adult behind the wheel of the car who, read the materials, ask the right questions, and are just professional in how they go about, in this case, managing the country.
Did you see the Goldman Sachs report on the 5% hit to GDP for the foreseeable future being caused by Brexit?
I think Brexit is ludicrous, and I do not understand anyone.
But the grown-up behind the wheel supported it.
And I can't explain that. And
then ignored the analysis from Goldman Sachs itself, which described the 5% GDP hit to... So, I mean, listen, it's nice of you to ring in and display such loyalty. And it's my job, of course, to point out some of the facts that fly in the face of your warm words, because the last person on earth that should be running our economy is somebody who both supported Brexit and completely ignores the analysis from your former employer that describes in rich detail the scale and the longevity of the epic damage that will continue to be done to our economy and our financial health for the foreseeable future, Frederick.
I agree. That's a massive question mark. And, I couldn't agree more with you. That I think Brexit was insane.
But he was a nice young man, and that's nice to hear, actually. He was a nice young man. I presume he made himself helpful around the office, and he did enough to get taken on full-time by Goldman Sachs a little bit later in the game, didn't he?
I was told to do everything I could to get him to join our team, and he chose to join a different team.
And you don't even harbour any bitterness.
No, that's absolutely fine. He has a great career, and really pleased to see adults behind the wheel.
Well, you can't keep saying adults behind the wheel about the man who voted for Brexit and then ignored his own bank's analysis of how awful it is. Can you? That sounds to me like a silly child.
Well, I think then you get into the world of politics and.
Well, we kind of are. We are talking about the Prime Minister, Fred. We are talking about the Prime Minister. It's going to be hard not to get into the world of politics. But
the short-term versus long-term nature of how people jostle for position and how they position themselves vis-a-vis the powers that be, and the complexities of the different power groups within the Conservative Party, which I know nothing about, but I'm sure that all plays a role in how people sort of behave and make decisions or present themselves to the public. But yeah, I guess there's also different visions of what Brexit could be or could have been versus what it is.
The one on the vision in which it was good is not a vision that anybody at Goldman Sachs would share, except of course the old adult behind the wheel that you used to work with, Frederick. Thank you. It's very kind of you to ring in. Although probably a little naive to expect a conversation about the Prime Minister to stay out of the world of politics. On we go. Anybody got anything nice to say about Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak? 0345 60 60973. Scott's been in touch. He says, what I like about Rishi Sunak is that he gets on with people from all walks of life. Upper class people, middle class people, and working class people. Well, no, maybe not working class people. Nick's in Manchester. Nick, what would you like to say?
Sorry, that last one.
He's good. Yeah, don't encourage him, honestly. He never stops texting me.
I'm sorry. I'm just jumping on the Feel Good Friday bandwagon, basically.
It's not feeling that good, is it? I mean, it's the least successful phone-in of the month, never mind the week. So far, the pressure's all on you, Nick.
Okay, so for Rishi Sunak, I thought during his conversations and like PMQs, he's always going and gunning for the Rwanda bill. I'm not going to talk about that bill.
You just did.
Because I know, like about how I feel about it.
Okay.
But it's about how he delivers what he says. He delivers it with passion. He fights for it. He sticks to his guns with it. And a lot of people are saying, no, it's a waste of money. It's not going to work.
So you admire his stubbornness?
Yeah. He said, I'm going to do this. I said I'm going to stop the boats. I'm coming up with the plan. Yeah. Everyone and their mums are telling me that it's not going to work. But no matter what, I've dedicated myself to this. I put this to the people.
That's an interesting flex. You know, it's not going to happen before the next election.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
But you admire him for sticking to his guns when stating that it would happen before the next election.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. He's just. Do
you want to buy a bridge?
It was difficult, James.
Yes.
Okay, I'm trying to find something.
I know you are, and listen. I shouldn't be so dismissive because listen, I'm not going to lie to you, and don't take this the wrong way, but it's very slim pickings this hour. People are really straining, which I think is why you got on.
It's probably why, and why I got on with that.
I know. That's what I'm thinking. At least we agree, because you don't even mean it.
I don't. I mean that I like the fact that he can. If his focus was elsewhere, if his focus was elsewhere and not on this, then it could be used for good.
So what you're saying is that if he had actually brought that level of commitment and determination to a policy that was both plausible and positive, that would be a really good thing.
It would be brilliant.
It would be fantastic. Yeah, I'd vote for him.
Amazing.
If he had some, But unfortunately for you, in this context, the policy to which he has dedicated enormous amounts of energy, about £250 million of our pounds, and epic commitment, is a crock of cabbage.
Nonsense. Yes.
Yeah.
It is nonsense, and we all know it is as well. I had to find something.
No, you didn't have to, did you? Because there's 1.4 million people who haven't rung in this week.
Good Friday. I'm trying to share the feel.
No, I love you. Should we hug it? Let's hug it out, yeah?
Let's hug it out.
There we go. Have you ever been? Do you fancy coming fast catamaran sailing next weekend?
As long as it's fast.
Amelia Cox has your headlines. 12:33 is the time. Does anyone know why David Frost has been banned from standing as a candidate for the Tories in the general election? It's Friday afternoon. No one's answering their phones. Natasha's working very hard, but she's on a train, so she's maybe struggling to get a signal. It might even be on Twitter. Just let me have a little look on there. This is journalism. This is live on your radio. I have got some reaction from almost everybody, actually, to the news that David Frost has been banned from standing as a Tory candidate. We can just cross live to that now. But I am struggling to pin down the precise reasons for it. There are various other members of Tory flotsam and jetsam tweeting about how they too are currently banned from standing for the Tories, but I just don't know. I can't work out why that would be, apart from the obvious reason that he's a blithering idiot. But that didn't stop Boris Johnson putting him in charge of Brexit negotiations, or indeed putting him in the House of Lords. My thanks to, let's make sure that we get this right, to Sienna Rogers at the House magazine, which is the sort of in-house parliamentary journal, who has directed me towards a Politics Home article in which Derek Guy, the online sartorial expert that I referenced a moment ago, does indeed cast an eye over both Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer's menswear. And neither of them emerged from it, I don't think, particularly well. Although Rishi Sunak is described as maybe the most trend-conscious politician in British history. And that's got to be a compliment, hasn't it? Some of the things that he's done, £95 sliders from the high-fashion streetwear label Palm Angels, some all-white minimalist trainers from Common Projects, 450 grand suede loafers from Prada. I like his clothes. That's the nicest thing I can say about him. Apart from the length of his trousers, I think he's got some quite nice clobber. And I like Keir Starmer. I think they're both quite... There you go. I'll start with it. They're both quite well-dressed, aren't they? They're both quite well-dressed. Now it's your turn to say something nice about either Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak, or, of course, both. Before that, a couple of texts. I thought I'd read these out together. Dear James, I just wanted to text to talk about my joy at listening to you every morning. Today in particular, Stop Speaking and Let Me Interrupt You is probably the funniest thing I've heard on the radio in a long time. Please keep being an utterly fearless and brilliant presenter. I shall do my best. This is from Graham. Dear LBC, I've been listening to LBC for years, and I am now switching off and never listening to you again because of James O'Brien. Not that you care. All that he does is slag off the Conservative Party and brown-nosed Labour. As a presenter, he should sit on the fence and listen to both sides. But he doesn't. He's an absolute disgrace and should take a leaf out of Nick Ferrari's book. That's from Graham in Morden. I like a bit of balance on the show, so I thought I'd read both of those out. Stuart's in Dartmouth. Stuart, who are you going to be nice about?
I'm going to be nice about Keir Starmer and funny about Rishi Sunak.
You can't. I'll be the judge of how funny you are, pal. Go on then.
But we're of the same age.
Yes.
And we all remember Spitting Image in its prime.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was funny.
I'll just put Jeffrey Archer in your mind.
Fair enough. So what are we going to say about Keir Starmer?
He's normal, James. He's a normal person. I think after all the nonsense we've had in the last 14 years and scandal after scandal after scandal, that you just need a bit of calm and normality to steady the ship.
Yes.
And that's what I really like about him, to be quite honest. And like you said earlier, the front benches with Angela Rayner and Wes Streeting, I really like them. So
he played. I mean, we perceived it for a long time as a weakness. The sort of lack of fireworks. The you could call it dullness. These were criticisms also levelled at Clement Attlee 80 years ago. But actually, as the election looms ever closer, they could become strengths.
Well, I think I do. I completely agree. I just think that. I mean, everything with David Cameron. And then the nightmare of Boris Johnson, and then the hilarity of Liz Truss. And I completely agree with what you said this morning. I don't even think Rishi Sunak wants to be there anymore.
No, I don't either.
Showing a lot of disinterest, really. And Prime Minister's questions, I've been following it diligently over the last few months. Oof. And you just look at the Tory side, and it's a bunch of gaggling buffoons. And then it flicks back to the Labour side, and they're just staring at them as if to say, are you for real?
They do indulge in a little bit of the toing and froing, but the gulf between the sort of gullish element, which seems to have taken over elements of the Tory party, and the Starmer element, which would be, you're right, normal and sober, in response does seem. And what go on? And the thing about Rishi Sunak.
I mean, he seems nice.
Yeah.
He seems a nice sort of person, but with everything that's going on around him, all of his...
How nice can you be if you're making these comments about deporting people and also, it's, we shall see. I shouldn't be trying to talk you out of your positivity. It's our lovely Friday fair. The funny thing was the Jeffrey Archer reference, I think, about the pockets and stuff. Lee is in Lurgan in Northern Ireland. Lee, who would you like to be nice about?
Hi, James. Good afternoon. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller.
Thank you. You've been waiting for 20 years for me to ask people to say something nice about politicians, haven't you?
I think it's a fantastic game. I think people should do it more.
It'll never catch on, mate. I'll tell you that for nothing. This will be the first and last time we ever do it. Unless you change the picture now. Anyway, go on. What warm words would you like to say?
Well, I'll do my utmost. Incidentally, I should also say I've never been motorbiking or skydiving or sailing, so I'm clearly not half the man Steve Baker is.
No, who here can honestly claim to be half the man that Steve Baker, half the hard man even that Steve Baker is, Lee? Go on.
If only. No, so I'd like to say something nice about Rishi Sunak. And to be as sincere as I can about it, I'd like to give him credit for his stance on Ukraine.
Yeah.
I think I'm not a great fan of the Prime Minister, I admit, but one should always give the devil his due. And I think, and this extends even to Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, who I have even lower opinions of.
Sure.
But I think Ukraine what's happening in Ukraine is still a massively important issue, and I think it's been overshadowed by recent other events in international affairs. And I think Russia cannot be allowed to win there, and I appreciate Rishi Sunak's continued support of it. And I think also, James, we can't take that for granted, because if you look at, say, the Republican Party in the United States and the growing antipathy that
I think Trump would pull the plug on his first day in the White House, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think
I don't think Sunak's position distinguishes him from Starmer. But you're right that we need to be reminded of the urgency of the situation there. We took some calls either late last week or early this week. I forget which. Not some calls. We spoke to some people on the ground, and the seriousness of the situation is both underestimated and arguably underreported, I think, Lee, now.
I couldn't agree more.
And you're right, Sunak has not stepped back. It's probably the only decent thing in Johnson's legacy, albeit that he acted out of self-interest. As always, he ended up doing the right thing. And my job, of course, is to throw the unfortunate reminder into the mix that he was also, of course, partying with a former member of the KGB and his son after disappearing, after parting company with his security detail on the way back from a NATO summit at which Russia would have very much been on the agenda, because the attempted murder and the successful murder of one British person, Dawn Sturgis, in Salisbury, would have been under discussion. And he then hot-footed it to Italy to party with a former KGB spy and his son. The son he subsequently put in the House of Lords. So Boris Johnson's attempt to cast himself as a sworn enemy of Vladimir Putin's Russia were pathetic, albeit that his support for Ukraine was authentic. It is 12:41. Thank you, Lee. I thought we might see Helen Hoddinott again, because there's a corner of my eye picking up on events at the Post Office inquiry, continuing to be febrile and possibly even scaling new heights of anger and emotion, Helen.
Well, yeah, that's right. We heard earlier from one of the lawyers representing the sub-postmasters, Edward Henry KC. He questioned Paula Venables, the former post office boss. He accused her of living in a cloud of denial and of giving a craven, self-serving account of herself. It was an eviscerating hour of questioning where she said she did her very best, but accepted that it wasn't good enough. And it has been followed directly by another lawyer representing postmasters, Sam Steen KC. He accused Paula Venables of leading through deception, manipulation and word weaving the reality she wanted in place. Ms Venables rejected those accusations, but bit by bit he set out strands of evidence that he suggested proved that she knew about bugs in the system, knew about complaints made by postmasters and problems with the Post Office's own prosecution of them back in 2013.
All of these coming one after another, bang, 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 attacking the Horizon system. By the end of 2013, you can have been in no doubt, Ms Venables, that the Horizon system needed investigation, needed inquiry, needed a deep investigation and review. Do you agree, Ms Venables?
Mr. Steen, I wish we had done that. I absolutely wish we had done that. I still had confidence in the Horizon system.
Well, Mr. Steen then referred to Ms Venables' comments that she had questioned colleagues about various discrepancies and concerns with the Horizon software. He pushed back against that and accused her of refusing to investigate because he said she was too scared of what she would discover.
We don't see emails saying, I demand answers, I need them now. What on earth has been going on with this system? We don't see those emails, Ms Venables. Why not?
When the letters came in from MPs and members of the public raising issues around the Horizon system, the experts were consulted and the answers were taken from them. Questions were asked all of the time. Whether I asked the right questions, whether I was given the right answers, I think is now a matter for the inquiry to look at.
Well, clearly unhappy with that answer there. Mr. Steen's questioning then took quite a personal turn, and once again, Paula Venables today broke down in tears.
Ms Venables, you're not stupid. You failed, didn't you? You failed to get into this on your account. You failed to ask the right questions. You couldn't be bothered, could you, Ms Venables?
I loved the Post Office. I gave it... I worked as hard as I possibly could to deliver the best post office for the UK.
Well, yeah, questioning is still going on.
The noises off are people in the room. They seem to distract her. Presumably it was a sub-postmaster scoffing or something like that.
Well, yeah, from the public gallery today, there have been some shout-outs to her.
Shout-outs. That's what DJs do.
Shouting across the room, I should say.
Shout out to my people. No, sorry.
And it has, it's led outbursts of emotion. It's led to the chairman of the inquiry, Sir Wyn Williams. He is attending over Zoom link today, but he's had to interject and kind of calm the people in the public gallery. There are, of course, a lot of wrongly convicted sub-postmasters themselves watching Paula Venables today. Today is also the day that a quashing of convictions of those sub-postmasters will come into law later after being approved by Parliament. So theoretically, some of them would have walked into that room today to watch her give evidence with those convictions, and they'll walk out with them quashed.
Wow, what an extraordinary observation. Can I ask you a completely unfair question? Do you think that the inquiry would be unfolding anyway? Would it be covered in quite the way that it is being covered by us and by others, were it not for that ITV drama just after Christmas?
I think the ITV drama changed everything because people have been working on this story, trying to get it into the spotlight for years and years and years. And that drama changed everything.
Just propelled it into an entirely new space. In fact, Julie Hesmondhalgh, who starred in that drama, was on Full Disclosure last week and addressed precisely the points that Helen has just talked about in characteristically charming fashion. If you want to have a listen to that, Helen, thank you. 12:47 is the time. It is 10 to 1. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Extraordinary scenes, really. And there's no answer to that question, is there? Definitive answer. I mean, Helen Hoddinott was quite right to describe the ITV drama featuring the sub-postmaster postmasters, and chiefly the story, of course, of Alan Bates, as being a game changer. But would Paula Venables be the recipient of so much public pillory for what she did if the drama hadn't happened? I don't know. And for the moment, I don't care, because I care chiefly about how the victims of this scandal are dealing with what I presume is quite a cathartic experience of seeing the architects of this scandal finally held to public account. Christopher Head is indeed one of those former post office sub-postmasters. Indeed, when he first got the gig back in, I think, 2006, he was the youngest ever. But it all fell apart, leaving him compelled to, he lost his post office, he lost the adjoining shop after the post office pursued him for a shortfall of £88,000, which was, of course, we now know, a non-existent shortfall and the fault of the Horizon computer system that's at the centre of this entire story. Christopher, thank you for stepping out of the inquiry to talk to us. I just want to know how you're feeling, how all of this is affecting you, and what you make of the story so far.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's very difficult to listen to, and this affects, I mean, especially with Paula Venables, in terms, obviously, because she had so much responsibility at the top of the post office. And, I mean, I have to remember that, she gave evidence to that select committee on the 3rd of February 2015 to say that she had, no miscarriages of justice and no knowledge of any remote access or problems with the Horizon system. But yet I got suspended 2 days later on the 5th of February 2015 and went under a criminal investigation. So I think the most important thing is that obviously she's been forced to come before the inquiry to give evidence. Now, I thought it was a bit strange and ironic that she said on her first day that she welcomed the opportunity to give evidence in public. Well, I thought, well, you've been hiding for 10 years. Where have you been? You've been asked multiple times to answer questions by media, by multiple people, and you chose to hide away and not do that. So it's a bit strange to make that statement, really.
Have you felt any sympathy for her as she's sort of struggled to hold it together and indeed burst into tears on several occasions?
Look, it is difficult. I mean, if you strip out the post office part and you think of it on a human level, I don't, doubt that it is a very, very difficult thing and not something that, I would, want to do myself. But at the end of the day, the only person that's put her in this position is herself, by the actions and decisions that she's taken or failed to take. By listening to advice that maybe she should have challenged or done more on. It's her own, fault that she's in this position, unfortunately.
And what about you? Have your feelings changed at all? Are you feeling any healing or any closure, to use that dreadful Californian term? But you understand why.
Yeah, look, I think as the inquiry progresses, week by week and month by month, every single witness that gives their evidence, it's as much as possible. If they do recall things, which is they use the line, "I don't recall an awful lot," but it's another piece of the jigsaw puzzle being put together. And I think once postmasters are all finally fully compensated, the next part of obviously hearing who knew what and when through the inquiry, and then eventually, hopefully, from that, we'll be able to piece everything together. And the Metropolitan Police have said, they'll start a nationwide investigation from 2026, and obviously I know that's an awful long time away, but this inquiry in the post office scandal is so complicated, going over 25 years. It's very, very hard to investigate.
Of course, the wheels of justice turn slowly, as all victims of these epic public scandals can attest. Finally, Christopher, because I'm sure you want to get back in, am I right in thinking now that you have some confidence that the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth is both emerging and set to completely emerge?
Well, I think obviously, when you ask the witnesses, they might have a different take on that. Obviously, I said they can't remember, or they want to portray things that they said things in a certain manner. But I think what we're seeing is that the documentary evidence and the emails that's being put before them is telling a completely different story, isn't it? That is actually showing out what they actually did and what they didn't do, and the decisions that they all took.
Christopher Head, thank you for especially stepping out of the room to talk to us as you follow the proceedings at this post office inquiry, where the ex-post office boss Paula Venables has been told, among many other things, that she lives in a cloud of denial. Follow Christopher on Twitter if you can, because he is a tireless chronicler of both the inquiry and the broader scandal, picking up also, I noticed from his Twitter feed, picking up particularly today upon the failure of somebody that we may have expected to turn up, the former General Counsel of the Post Office, General Counsel Jane McLeod, refusing to give evidence or failing to give evidence. An important witness, she was described as, has been removed from the timetable after refusing to cooperate with the inquiry. That is the kind of thing that you're gleaning from just following Christopher on Twitter if you're not following the inquiry directly, which you won't be if you've been listening to me. I've got another clip of Salman Rushdie to play you, but first, this is really funny. Who knew that so many City heavy hitters were tuning into this programme every day? So you heard Frederick earlier talking about Rishi Sunak working as an intern at Goldman Sachs and being so good at it that they desperately tried to get him to join their team full-time, but he took another offer and joined a different team full-time. I don't know if I should mention any names. You haven't asked me not to, but I don't. So I'll make up a name. I say John's been in touch. And John says, Kwasi Kwarteng was an intern on our syndicate desk at West LB, which I think was a German bank. It was a lovely bloke, James, but hopeless. Unlike the earlier story about Rishi Sunak at Goldman Sachs, we didn't push him to stay on our desk after he'd completed his internship. Kwasi Kwarteng, he just can't catch a break, can he? This full disclosure I've done with Salman Rushdie, I've made it pretty clear to you how proud I am of it, and I don't use that word that often because it doesn't go just into the light, it goes into the dark as well. And when you're talking to somebody who has lost their sight in one eye as a consequence of an attack by an extremist, an Islamist extremist who thought he was enacting the fatwa that was placed on Salman after the publication of satanic verses, you'll get an idea of why I found it such a moving and profound experience. This is a very short clip, a very powerful one, where Salman Rushdie reflects upon very, very nearly dying.
If you get this close to dying, you get a really good look at it. You know, I mean, I know we're all going to get there, but, you know, I had a good preview. And when you've seen that preview, you're really not that excited to see the movie. But what I mean is that a little shadow of that stays with you.
Yeah.
Never completely goes away. Because I know what it's like. I know exactly what it's going to be like. And
so it's demystified?
Yeah, but just there in the corner of your head.
Yeah, okay.
You know, like all the time. You know, we all know what's going to happen to all of us, but mostly we just live our lives. You know, we don't spend our time morbidly thinking about the final moments. And I was like that too. I was just living my life. But now there's just this little shadow in the corner.
But there isn't. You haven't come away with a sort of determination to, because you already, as a writer, every minute matters, doesn't it? So you already had that. It's not like you've come out as determined.
But it does feel a bit like every day is a gift.
Right, a bonus.
Yeah, yeah, it does feel like that. I wake up in the morning and I think, you know, still here.
It is 12:58. That is it from me for another week. And indeed, I'm off all next week as well. Lewis Goodall will be standing in for me, so be gentle with him. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player, where you can also, of course, get hold of that full disclosure interview with Salman Rushdie. It's the official LBC app, and you can use it to pause and rewind live radio as well as, of course, the podcast. Download it now for free from your app store or head to globalplayer.com. Coming up at 4, Ben Kentish is in once again for Tom Swarbrick, but now it's time for Sheila Fogarty. 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 Now